Good evening. I call the November 14th, 2023 regular board meeting of the Richland 2 Board of Trustees to order. Please be aware that we have two trustees attending tonight's meeting telephonically. That's Dr. Monica Scott and Mrs. Angela Nash. The agenda for tonight's meeting has been published and made available publicly. May I please have a motion regarding the approval of the agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to approve the agenda for the November 14th, 2023 regular board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini to approve the agenda and seconded by Mrs. Porter. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Agostini, is that correct on the screen?
It is.
Before we vote, is Mrs. Nash and Dr. Scott, are you both there?
Yes, I'm here. This is Dr. Scott. Yes, I'm here as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We will move to item 3.1, executive session. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move that we convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing student appeals, student admission requests into the district's adult ed program, breach of contracts, employment recommendations, and certified releases.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Washington, is that correct on the screen?
Yes.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion passes. The board will now enter into executive session. May I have a motion to end executive session?
Mr. Trapp,
Mrs. Porter.
I move that we adjourn to executive session at 6:26 p.m. and resume public session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Porter, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Porter, is that correct on the screen?
Yes, it is.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. I would also like to make everyone aware that Dr. Monica Scott and Mrs. Angela Nash are joining us telephonically this afternoon. We'll now move on to the inspirational moment and Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. LaShonda McFadden will introduce tonight's guest.
On behalf of Board Member and Vice Chair Angela Nash, I would like to introduce Irv Mack. Irv Mack is a God-fearing man, husband, and father who is happily married to his beautiful wife, Ashley, and they have 4 beautiful babies, Saya, Jackson, Alina, and Jace. Irvin is a formal educator, coach, and administrator, where his most recent stint was at AC Flora High School, where he served as administrative principal for 3 years. Irvin currently serves as a minister of gospel in his current role as the Midlands Multi-Area Director for Fellowship of Christian Athletes, overseeing 15 counties here in the Midlands. He also coaches middle school football for Ben Lippen, and in his spare time, he enjoys spending time with his family, reading, working out, and fishing whenever he can. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Irvin Mack.
Thank you so much for having me here. And because it's the month of Thanksgiving, I just want to give thanks and gratitude for giving me and my team opportunity to come into the schools here in Richland too, but also throughout our 15 counties to share and pour into the lives of coaches and athletes. Being a former coach, teacher, and administrator, I've seen many struggles of our students and the lack of hope that they've been looking for. And we know that our kids are searching, and they're looking and searching for something so much greater, but they are coming at it from a worldview. And so what we do is we come in and try to help shape that, what the world is giving, because we know that their worldview leads them to comparison, leads them to isolation, which also then leads to depression. And what I've seen in my years as an administrator was a rise in suicide cases as well. And so that was really bothersome to me. And so coming into Fellowship of Christian Athletes, taking a leap of faith, leaving the school system. I worked in Richland 1 for 4.5 years. Again, I've been a teacher and educator for over 10 years. I knew that we needed to give our kids something greater, give our coaches something greater. And what we do is we come into the schools, we come into to these environments, meeting our coaches and athletes where they are and giving them something so much greater that the world can't take away from them. And that's a sense of hope that's eternal. And I'm so grateful that we get the opportunity to do that on the campuses, in the locker rooms, on the fields, sharing the love of God with our student athletes, because that's one thing that the world can't take from them. And so I want to continue to encourage you guys and just thank you for this opportunity that we are given to pour into the lives of our student athletes and our coaches and all they have influence over, because we serve more. Just because in the title it says Fellowship of Christian Athletes, we serve so many students who are non-athletes because we open our doors to everyone. So from the bottom of our heart, I ask that you continue to pray for our ministry, pray for what we get to do, but also continue to support and invite and invest in the ministry and in the opportunity that gives hope in a way that's eternal and that can't be taken away from our coaches and athletes. So again, from the bottom of my heart, during this month of Thanksgiving, I want to say thank you and show my gratitude for what you guys do, and also know that we are praying with and alongside you guys to continue to serve and pour into our coaches, to continue to pour into our teachers, our students, and administrators here in Richland too. Thank you.
Sir, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I sure will. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. We will now move on to the consent agenda. May I please have a motion regarding the approval of the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move to approve the consent agenda for the November 14th regular board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion was made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Agostini to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Washington, is that correct? All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. On my agenda here, we have the minutes and the employment recommendations listed separately. So let's have a motion on those just to be on the safe side. We don't need to? Okay. I'm all for that. We also have no public participation tonight. So we will move on to voting on executive session items. May I please have a motion regarding student appeals?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini,
I move to deny student number 1.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Mrs. Agostini and seconded by Mrs. Porter. No, that was Ms. McFadden. Someone to my left, for sure. Is there any discussion about student one?
Yes, I'm looking to pull this one out and thinking that Blythewood Academy may be more appropriate.
Okay. Thank you. If the motion fails to deny the appeal, you're welcome to make a motion to send the student to Blythewood Academy. Is there any other discussion? Mrs. Agostini, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 2 yes, 5 no. The motion fails. May I please have another motion on student number one?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Porter.
I move that we send student number 1 to Blythewood Academy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Mrs. Porter and seconded by Mrs. McFadden to send student one, to Blythewood Academy. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Porter, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, board members, please vote. No, I'm sorry, that should say student number one. The motion is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding student number 2?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini,
I move to deny the appeal for student number 2.
is there a second? Motion is made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Mrs. McFadden. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Agostini, is that correct?
It is.
Board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding student number 3?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini,
I move to deny the appeal for student number 3.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini and seconded by Mrs. McFadden. Is there any discussion? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Board members, please vote. Oh, Mrs. Nash, have you had a chance to vote?
Sorry, just got it. I think I did it. Did it go through?
It did. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion on student number 4?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move that the board, or student number 4, attend Blythewood Academy for the remainder of the 2023-2024 school year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Mrs. Porter. Is there any discussion? Could you please restate the motion?
Oh, yes. I move that student number 4 attend Blythewood Academy for the remainder of the 2023-2024 school year.
All right, is that correct, Ms. Agostini?
It is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding student number 5?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to deny the appeal for student number 5.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Mrs. Washington. Is there any discussion?
The motion is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion for student number 6?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to deny the appeal for student number 6.
Is there a second? Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini, seconded by Mrs. McFadden. Is there any discussion?
For student number 6, I believe that Blythewood Academy for the remainder of the year is more appropriate. I'll be pulling this one out.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Is that correct, Mrs. Agostini?
It is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 3 yes, 4 no. The motion fails. May I have an additional motion for student number 6?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Porter.
I move that student number 6 attend Blythewood Academy for the remainder of the 2023-2024 school year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Dr. Scott?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Porter and seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion? All right, Mrs. Porter, is that correct? All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding the student appeals request, student admission request into the district's adult education program?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to approve the student admission request into the district's adult education program for students 1 through 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini and seconded by Mrs. Washington. Is there any discussion? All right, board members, please vote. Oh, Ms. Agostini, is that correct up there?
It is correct.
The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding the breach of contracts?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move to direct administration to make a formal complaint to the State Board of Education regarding the professional employee number 1 who breached their employment contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington and seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Washington, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding breach of contracts for employee number 2?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move to direct the district administration to not make a formal complaint to the State Board of Education regarding professional employee number 2 who breached their employment contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Washington and seconded by Mrs. McFadden. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Washington, is that correct on the screen? All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding the breach of contract on employee number 3?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs.
I
Washington.
move to direct district administration to make a formal complaint to the State Board of Education regarding professional employee number 3 who breached their employment contract with the district.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Washington and seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Mrs. Washington? All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding the breach of contract on employee number 4?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move to direct district administration to make a formal complaint to the State Board of Education regarding professional employee number 4 who breached their employment contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington and seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Is that correct on the screen, Mrs. Washington? Board members, please vote. The vote is 5 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. What? Okay, I'm sorry. May I please have a motion regarding the breach of contract on employee number 5?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs.
I
Washington.
move to direct district administration to make a formal complaint to the State Board of Education regarding professional employee number 5 who breached their employment contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Washington, is that correct? Board members, please vote. Oh, I was preoccupied. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding employment recommendations and certified releases?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to approve the employment recommendations and certified releases.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Agostini and seconded by Mrs. Washington. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Agostini, is that correct on the screen?
It is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We will now move to unfinished business, item 8.1. The agenda item in this section is regarding the 2024 board meeting schedule. Dr. Moore.
Mr. Chair, typically, the board meets on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. In May, we have graduation scheduled on the fourth Tuesday of the month. So district administration is presenting tonight 2 options for meeting dates for the board's consideration. Option A is Tuesday, May 7th and Tuesday, May 21st. Option B is Tuesday, May 14th and Thursday, May 30th. The reason for Thursday, May 30th is because our staff would have to have a day after graduation to break down and bring all of the equipment back and get set up for a board meeting. So we need a day in between to do that. Hence, it would be on a Tuesday and a Thursday for option B.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Board members, may I have a motion regarding the schedule, the 2024 board meeting schedule, and in your motion, if you would choose option A or B?
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Scott.
I'd like to make a motion that we choose option A for the 2024 board meeting schedule.
Motion has been made by Dr. Scott. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Mrs. Washington. Is there any discussion regarding the proposed schedule? While we are bringing up the motion on the screen, what we have, the motion is on is choosing option A, which is Tuesday, May 7th and Tuesday, May 21st for the May options on our schedule. The rest is as listed on the screen. Dr. Scott, I don't know if you can, if you see this yet, but it says I move to approve the 2024 board meeting schedule to include May 7th and May 21st as meeting dates for the month of May.
Yes, but it just says May, and then it has a blank at the 7th and the 21st. It's correct.
Okay. All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We'll now move to item 9.1, legislative update. This agenda item, the agenda item in this section is regarding support of the current South Carolina School Board Association resolutions. There are a total of 34 resolutions. Board members, are there any resolutions that you would like to remove from the block of resolutions?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. McFadden.
I would like to pull 3 resolutions. The first one being number 7, Economic Development Tax Incentives. Number 14, Impact Fees. And number 22, Public School Choice.
All right, Mrs. McFadden, you said number 7, number 14, and 22. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, is there any other resolutions board members like to remove?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Agostini.
I would like number 26, school governance takeovers, and number 33, tuition tax credits and vouchers.
Thank you, Ms. Agostini. Is there any other resolutions we would like to remove from the block? Mrs. Nash and Dr. Scott, I want to make sure you're there and you had a chance to add anything if you wanted to.
Yes, I'm here, and I support all of the motions, so thank you. Same, the ones I already got covered, thank you.
Okay, so at the moment, and my recommendation is that we vote on number 34 separately, simply because it is a different action, more or less. but we're going to remove 5 of the resolutions. That's number 7, number 14, number 22, number 26, and number 33. So we need a motion to vote on the remainder of 1 through 32.
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to approve statements 1 through 6, 8 through 13, 15 through 21, 23 through 25, and check my math, everybody, and then number 27 to 32.
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini, and I was checking your math as you went, and that is correct. Board members, is there any further discussion on those
Second.
resolutions? All right, we have a second.
Second.
Wait, did I ask?
I thought you were asking for discussion.
No, no, you're right. I didn't get a second, though. Mrs. McFadden, did you second it? Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, now discussion. Mrs. Porter, was there?
Yes, I wanted to look at number 7, which was being pulled out. I just wanted to make a few statements about 7, 14, and 22.
Okay. Well, let's vote on the ones that we have, the motion on the floor, and then we'll come back and address those.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no further discussion on the specific, which again, I will repeat one time, it's motion, or it's resolutions 1 through 6, 8 through 13, 15 through 21, 23 through 25, and 27 to 33. 32, I'm sorry. It says 32 on my page. I still said 33. Mrs. Agostini, does that look correct on the board?
That is correct.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We now have 5. I'll tell you what I would like to do before we discuss the 5. Number 34, the reason I suggested we do it separately is because what the School Board Association wants to do, at least what it looks like to me, is they want to remove that from their they want to delete that from the resolutions. So we would need to have a motion to either support their desire to delete it, or we would need to have a motion to ask them to keep it on there.
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to support the proposed resolution for deletion for item 34.
Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Mrs. Porter? Ms. McFadden. All right, so motion made by Mrs. Agostini and seconded by Mrs. McFadden. Is there any discussion on resolution 34? Mrs. Agostini, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I now have a motion regarding resolution number 7?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Porter.
I move that we approve resolution number 7.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Porter and seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Porter.
So my comments for number 7, for this is economic development tax incentives. One is I want us to keep in mind that a part of our SCSBA ethics that we all signed, is that we would support the legislation's funding, which will improve the opportunities and environment for students and teachers. Looking at this resolution, I completely support it, knowing the time that we're in today and knowing how quickly these different neighborhoods and things are growing around our district, and knowing that we don't receive the tax aid due to Act 388, and it's very much dependent on businesses. I think this is important for our school district, and it gives us some control in regulating that, and so that we can meet the needs of all students in Richland too. So I do support number 7.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on resolution number 7?
Yes, sir, Mr. Trapp.
Mrs. McFadden.
The reason why I wanted this pulled is because it is taxing businesses that would try to come to this area. As you know, we are a rural community here. We don't have a lot of businesses. If we want businesses to come to support us tax-wise, as far as on our tax statements, we're going to have them come. But it's a deterrent to come if they have fees and extra taxes that they have to pay to come. They're already not here. So if we continue to push tax incentives and things like that, then it's going to be less likely that they come. But if we can get them here and get their business started, then it'll look like we can actually get some kind of taxes coming, because we aren't getting any from our rural community and our suburbs here. So that's why I have this passed and I pulled from us. And I know that there's a lot of rural communities around, so I would like to keep this pulled, and I would like for board members to vote, but vote your conscience on this. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Mr.
Mrs.
Mr.
Agostini?
Chairman?
I was going to, you said Agostini first?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
And I concur with Mrs. McFadden. Richland County is known to have one of the highest tax rates, not only in the state, but also in the country. And this just, to me, doesn't invite new businesses to come to our county, to our school district. And when people like Scout come, other businesses come too that fund the schools in a different capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini. Dr. Scott, did you have a comment?
Oh, that was me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Nash.
Mrs. Nash. Yeah. I was gonna say those same sentiments. Ms. Agostini did say that we are some of the highest in the state, and it's true. Our sister areas like Greenville and other areas have they're booming partly in part because their taxes are lower than ours, which is, kind of insane considering the growth that they have. But part of that growth is because they have had lower taxes. And although we may have signed, saying that, we would support this and that, but some things we don't see until after we've signed. And so I'm going to be voting along with Ms. McFadden and Ms. Agostini.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Dr. Moore.
I would just like to offer the district's perspective on this issue. We support what the School Board Association, Act 388, allows for taxes to be collected from businesses. We do not pay any taxes for homeowners, so they're not contributing to the building of schools or to the school operations. This has a direct financial impact on our ability to provide that quality of education that we commit to our parents and to their students. And so the district does support this because it does impact us financially.
Thank you. Was there any other, is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Mrs. McFadden.
I know that the school district would support this because it does bring in finances to the school district. However, I feel like if we can get through some of the things that we need to do in our financial books, then it would be okay to tax someone, but I would not willing to be supporting taxing businesses to get more funds into our school district until we actually go through our books and get our audit and things back and do some shifting. I do appreciate Dr. Moore's input. However, I still remain firm that I don't want to tax other people just so that we can continue to get more money into this district when we have what I consider, need to go through our books and our money to make sure that we don't need that money.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I don't have a discussion, but I just want to add that although we are taking a vote as a district, overall, every school district will be voting. So regardless of what our vote is, it is the outcome of the entire school district. So I just wanted to state that for the public. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Scott. Any other discussion on number 7? All right, Tanedra, could we have the motion on the screen? We go. Oh, and I should point out, to approve this means that we would support it at the delegation, as a delegation. Board members, please vote. The vote is 3 yes, 4 no. The motion fails. May I please have a motion regarding resolution number 14?
Mr. Trapp,
Mrs. Porter.
I move that we support resolution number 14 to levy impact fees for residential developments. I see how it impacts us directly in Richland County. And due to Act 388, it's even more impertinent that we support this resolution. Remember, we've agreed to represent the interests of the entire district when making decisions, and to rely on available facts and on my judgment, on my judgment rather than on individuals and special interest groups. We also support legislative funding, which will improve educational opportunities and the environment for students and teachers.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion has been made by Mrs. Porter to support resolution 14, and has been seconded by Dr. Scott. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair Trapp.
Mrs. McFadden.
Again, I will not be supporting anything in which we are, as a district, are expecting fees and taxes and such from any entity at this time.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion regarding resolution 14?
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Moore.
the district's position on this is that we do support impact fees for the reasons that Ms. Porter just outlined. Currently, Act 388, homeowners do not pay any school tax. And all we have to do is look at the building that's taking place across our district and understand that we are going to have to build schools. We're going to have to add wings and additions. We're going to have to provide education to the students that are moving into those areas. And since homeowners are not paying any taxes, an impact fee will help to generate revenue to offset that cost, which will reduce our requirement to borrow additional money that we will need to meet the needs of our students.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Is there any other discussion on number 14?
I was just, Mr. Chairman Trapp.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone's looked at their recent tax bill, but if you have, they just recently came out, and I will be voting no on this because currently, right now, even though we don't have housing on the taxes, if anybody's taking a look at their tax bill and the increase that we've just gotten even most recently, you'll see that it's pretty extensive, especially coming into a time where people are literally struggling to put gas in their cars. I'm just not going to support it at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. Any other comments? All right, Mrs. Porter, is that correct on the screen?
It is.
All right, board members, if you would please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding resolution number 22?
Hey, Chairman Trapp, I don't think they'll let me amend it, but that was supposed to be a no for me. I tried to hit it with my little pencil thing.
Okay, well, can we change the vote? The motion will still carry, but can we change it?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agustin?
I move that we reconsider
Okay, yes, ma'am.
item number 14.
Do we need to second a motion to reconsider?
Yes.
Can I get a second? Or is there a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by, a motion made by Mrs. Agustin to reconsider the question and seconded by Mrs. McFadden. So board members, let's vote again on that motion.
So we need to vote, first of all, to
Oh,
reconsider.
Okay, yes.
And then vote on the resolution.
All right, Mrs. Agustin, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, vote. Board members, please vote. The vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. Is there, the original motion was made by
She'll need to restate the motion.
who? Ms. Porter made the motion. Ms. Porter, would you restate the motion you made earlier regarding 14?
I move that we support resolution number 14.
And can we have a
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Washington?
Yes. Okay.
All right, so we are going to vote on a motion regarding resolution 14 to support it. Any questions or any concerns? All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 5 yes, 2 no. The motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding resolution number 22?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Porter.
I move that we support resolution number 22. I'll wait for comments.
Yes, please. May I have a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Porter and seconded by Dr. Scott, I believe. I don't hear good, so. All
Yes,
right.
that's correct.
All right, is there any discussion?
Mr. Trapp,
Mrs. Porter?
I'd just like to remind our board that I'm really proud of a colleague that shared in our last regional meeting that what they were most proud of in Richland 2 was all of the choices that we offer our students. I think during this time when during this time in our nation where we're considering vouchers for private education, I think the choices that we offer our public school students should be just as great. And I firmly support public schools and public school choice, and it particularly makes Richland 2 just a joy to be with. I'm so proud of Richland 2 and all the choices.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Trapp?
Mrs. McFadden?
So I was a previous homeschool mom, and so I think that options should be available to our students. Richland 2 is very robust in the programs that we offer. We have had Magnet Night all last week and the week before. However, it's based on a lottery. So you have to do certain things in order to get into those limited spaces. And so for me, I think public school choice is a great option. However, there are other avenues by which children can learn and be successful that aren't offered in all public schools. There are charter schools available that might be better, or private schools that may be better than other schools, public schools. Although we have a robust magnet program here, not all schools and not all communities have that. And again, if you're in zone for school A, you can't go to school B unless you have transportation, unless you have money, because most of our magnet programs cost. So there is not an equitable way in which all students have the ability to go to all the programs. If you're at Westwood and you want to be, if you're at Spring Valley and you want to go to cosmetology, well, you have to take certain courses in transportation to get there. And vice versa. Spring Valley is closed to a lot of places. So those options are not actually available to everyone. They're only available to those who are zoned for Spring Valley. I like all the programs and the vastness of it. However, public school choice is one of many options. And as far as students are concerned, parents should have the ability to choose where their child goes to school, and it be funded by them through their taxes. If they're paying taxes, they should have an option for where their child goes to school, because it's mandatory in the state of South Carolina and all other states that children get an education. So it's mandatory they go to school. So why can't we have an option for where they go?
Thank you.
Mr. Trapp?
Dr. Scott?
Yeah, I just have a question for clarification. Mrs. McFadden, just for clarification, you mentioned that the magnet schools cost. Can you clarify what you mean so I can have a better understanding of what costs that you are stating about magnet schools and which ones cost?
Well, my kids have been in magnet school since they started public school, and every year I have an over $250 fee that I have to pay. That does not include their sweatshirts, but it does include field trips. It does include activities, food, those kind of things. However, if that fee isn't paid every year, then they can't be in the program, or that fee rolls over every year. And I'm not going to say the schools, but I know that to be true in many schools. And in order to get into those magnet programs, they're scheduled a day and time, and they have to go and do a reading or a writing or some kind of an activity in order to get approved to be in that school. I know one year we had to go, and there's a whole bunch of students in there. Your name is called. You go to the classroom and you do what you're told to do, and then you're scored a certain way, and then you get accepted into the program. When you get accepted in the program, you have a fee, transportation, those types of things. And that's been consistent since my children have been in elementary school.
So basically what you're saying when you refer to cost is that the fees associated with all of our schools, because all of our schools have fees that's associated with different classes and programs. So that's what you mean, right? For clarification, you mean that the school fees that every school and every school district provides, correct?
No, ma'am. They also have school fees that they pay. So my kids are enrolled in a middle and high school. They have school fees for books and general class fees for whatever classes that they're in, along with a magnet program fee for being in that magnet program. That's why I say Yes, they did.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Agostini?
Yes, I am not in support of this resolution from the fact that I was a private school family, and we chose public school. I love Richland too. I love the choice, but I would like, as a parent of a child who had learning disabilities, for parents to be able to pick between lines what is the best choice for their student, whether it's public or private.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Mrs. Porter?
I'd also like to add that due to the size of our district and the amount of students that are coming into our district, and due to Act 388, we have limitations on how many students can participate in different programs, and that's something that we have to do, unfortunately, due to the limitations of population and so forth, and the lack of businesses that we have. Again, we would probably be able to support more choice and transportation should we support certain bills that would give us the funds to make these decisions. So I just wanted to keep that in mind as we vote on the support of public school choice, resolution number 22.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Moore?
the district does support number 22. First and foremost, we do believe that a parent should make the best choice for their student, and we believe that Richland 2, as a school district, is the best choice for our students. The concern with this, with not supporting this resolution is first and foremost local control. State mandated items do not always reflect what local jurisdictions need, local districts need. What may work in Greenville, Spartanburg, Orangeburg, Abbeville may not work in Richland 2. And therefore, to have a state mandated that's one size fits all negates local control, because we have a locally elected school board who understands our community and what our parents need and what our students need. So the district believes that this should be left in the hands of our local school board. The other concern that the district would have with not supporting this is the fact that while money does follow the student, when that student returns, and if that student, and most of the time the student does return to public school, the money does not come back because it's already been expended to the charter school, to the home school, to the private school. And so it does financially also impact our ability to provide the options that our parents are asking us for.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? All right, Mrs. Porter, is that correct on the screen?
Yes, it is.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 3 yes, 4 no. The motion fails. May I please have a motion regarding resolution number 26?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Porter?
I move that we support resolution number 26.
Is there a second? I'm sorry.
Second.
Was that Dr. Scott? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Porter and seconded by Dr. Scott to support resolution number 26. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Trapp?
Mrs. Porter?
Again, following the same sentiment given by our superintendent, this is a resolution, if not supported, it would take away local control. There are needs that every district has, and one reason why we have our schools and school boards is to specifically advocate for the needs of of that area. So I fully support Resolution Number 26, school governance, opposing school governance takeovers.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini?
I've said this before about this resolution, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I do believe if a district is not providing the appropriate education, if these students are not being educated, and this isn't generally happening in a one-time year, it's 3 or 4 years of failing before the state comes in and takes over. If the district isn't doing it, the teachers aren't doing it, we're not providing the education, something needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Trapp?
Mrs. Porter?
One more thing to consider, as I've reflected on some of the changes that we've had, when our state comes in and mandates anything, I believe that it should be also funded. And what we have seen is when the state comes in, they make different choices about our schools, and then they won't provide the funding for those things. And then what are you to do? If we don't support the bills to give us more funding due to growth and impact of our students, and we don't support the funding of what can help these schools progress, and yet you mandate that they make these changes and mandate the hours and hours of training and professional development on these teachers and give them nothing to be able to provide that, you're setting these schools up for failure. And so we have to do what it takes to provide the tools so that they can make that progress. And that may mean that you vote differently, but I would not put that on the schools by not giving them the tools that they need to make progress.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Washington?
for this particular resolution, I will not support it because we do have opportunities across the state where we have districts and students who are not being served. And I know this isn't just particularly for our district, but when when the School Board Association takes this up, school districts need the assistance to be able to move students forward if it's not happening. And when you have school districts that are constantly failing children year after year, we say, I taught first in a rural school district, and I've seen firsthand when a state comes in and when they, the Office of Transformation, and I know what it puts, the pressure that it puts on teachers, and I know what pressure it puts on students in the community, but at some point, someone has to take control to be able to move the students forward. And it's not always a funding thing, because many times we have funding. It's a capacity thing. It is, do people have the competence to be able to do the different things? And so I will not be supporting resolution number 6. I am in support of school governance taking over.
Thank you. Any other comments or concerns? All right, Mrs. Porter, is that correct on the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 4 yes, 3 no, the motion carries. May I please have a motion regarding resolution number 33?
Mr. Trapp?
Mrs. Porter?
I move that we support tuition tax credits, and I move that we support the opposition of tuition tax credits and vouchers.
Okay, so you support the resolution?
Yes, I do.
Okay. There was a lot of don'ts and do's in there. I want to make sure we're right.
And it didn't
Okay.
feel right saying those words.
Right, I understand. All right, is there a second?
Second?
Is that Dr. Scott? All right, motion was made by Mrs. Porter and seconded by Dr. Scott to support resolution 33. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
again, I'll just repeat, I support school choice.
Thank you.
Mr. Trapp?
Mrs. Porter.
I just would like to mention that what we've seen in discussions in the past and with our legislation is that during the discussion of using vouchers, there wasn't much discussion about what they would be used for, and is it indeed for every student. So with this particular resolution, you have room for using vouchers with no guidance. So for example, we would not want our state to put funds towards vouchers and then a school be able to not accept students with special needs or not use the vouchers for students with special needs. But there is not any guidelines or specifications saying that these vouchers would limit the school to be able to not approve a student or accept a student into their private institution. And when that changed at the last minute, might I add, that's when this whole movement changed for me. When you can say that schools can say no to a child due to their special needs, due to whatever they come up with, then we should not be giving public dollars for institutions to use, for them to use it how they see fit for what students they particularly choose and them not have to speak to it. I believe if we're going to give public funds, which are originally designated for public schools, then those public funds need to be specific to every single child. And that right there was not in that bill when it was introduced, or actually it was in the bill and at the last minute they took it out. And that's not fair, and that's not representing the people of South Carolina.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms.
Mr. Chairman?
Washington,
Go ahead, Ms. Nash can go
Ms.
first.
Nash, would you go ahead?
Oh, sorry. Well, I was going to say, any talk about not covering special needs is all covered under state law. So that's a state law that they have to cover you. But also, what we're talking about is there are people who pay taxes here who may not send their kids to public school. So they may pay taxes here, but they don't have the access to vouchers. I'm going to be a no on this as well, because that is not school choice. If you're paying taxes here, then you also should have the choice of where you send your child.
Thank you. Mrs. Washington?
Yes. So when we have parents who say that they are not satisfied with schools, if we even speak about, special ed and special needs students, we have parents who are constantly even fighting those conversations across the state as well. I believe the parents should have the choice of where they send their child, and if they need the support financially to be able to do that, then they should have the opportunity to do that as well. If I am not satisfied with what is happening to my child in a particular school or school district, and some school districts across our state, they don't have school choice like we do within our district. And then also, I believe it was at our school law meeting where Debbie Elmore was talking about the funding is available for parents who may need the current funding. I believe it's up to $6,000. I have to go back and look in my notes. But that funding is even available for parents to use for educational resources. And so I think when we think about parents who need additional tutoring, why? Because it's not offered in every single one of our schools. When you have parents who are crying out because their kids are failing classes and they feel like they cannot get the support at the school level, why not allow them to utilize some of those same type of funding to be able to go to a place like Sylvan Learning Center to be able to get the support that they need so that they can be successful? Because we're not providing response to intervention in every single school for every single child. And we're talking about to see parents crying because their children are not producing the way that they know that they can in a public school system. When you hear parents that are brokenhearted because they feel like people are failing their children, I will support a parent being able to get funding anyway so that their child can be supportive. And I know that we talk about tax money and dollars, but children matter. And if we say children matter, it doesn't matter where they go to get the support that they need. We want to make sure that children are able to have a purpose-driven and future-ready. And if our school district or any school district can't provide it, then a parent should say, I want my child to get that education wherever they go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion or comments? Okay, I have one. I looked over all these resolutions and made me a little sheet here, and the only one that I checked a definite no on was this resolution. So I hope that we create a school district and maintain a school district where people will choose our school district because we offer the best source of education they have available. But if we don't, I believe competition, I'm a free market person, I believe competition is essential. I've worked for government agencies most of my life, and I've seen the inefficiency in our government system, and I will not support this resolution because I want to see competition. I hope that we are the best, and therefore we don't have competition, but I still do not support this resolution. Is there any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Moore.
as I've already stated, the district does support this for the reasons I've already stated. And yes, I agree. I love competition, and I am not afraid of competition. And I will say from a personal note, I have had my children throughout my military career in private school, in private Christian school, and in public school. The challenge that I have with this, or as the district has with this particular item, once again, is around the funding. Because when you remove funds from public education, then that limits our ability to do the things that we say we want to do. We want to give our teachers and our staff raises so that they're competitive. Well, that takes funding. 85 to 90% of our budget is spent on our salaries. That leaves a minimal amount of money to do the other things that we need to do, and does not cover any of the operation costs that go along with running our school district. I am not opposed to choice, and I do want to make sure that we give our parents what they need for their students, but I just have to remind everybody that Act 388 limits that, because it limits our ability to have additional finances that we need, which means we will be going back to the public when we borrow money, and then the public pays millage to cover our debt. And that is the way the act is set up, and that is the way it functions. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. It's not that we are against choice. It's not that we are afraid of competition. We embrace it. But we need to understand that it costs money to educate our students and provide that level of education that we have promised to our parents.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Is there any other questions or discussion? All right, Mrs. Porter, is that correct on the screen? Support?
Yes, sir.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 2 yes, 5 no. The motion fails. And that is the last of our resolutions. And I would like to add, just so the public is fully aware, that these are, when we go to our conference in a couple of weeks, the delegates will be voting with all the other school districts in the state, and then these items will be presented to our legislature by the School Board Association. So this is a very statewide thing, and our support for these resolutions is just a drop in the bucket, really, but we appreciate everybody's support.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Dr. Moore.
Just want to provide some additional information around the questions about costs for magnet programs. I did ask for it to be checked, and I just want to let everyone know and have it on the record that no student is denied participation because of associated fees. And every school has fees attached when students go to field trips, or they're purchasing clothing or anything else that's attached to whatever that activity is at school. but no students are denied participation because of cost.
Dr. Moore, I agree with that, but that goes on the student's fee that rolls over every year that still needs to be paid. So they do get to participate, but that fee does have to be paid every year.
All right, thank you, Dr. Moore, and thank you, Ms. McFadden. All right, we will now move on to item 9.2, update from the Legislative Committee. The next item is our Legislative Committee update. Mrs. McFadden.
Okay, so as you know, we have instituted the Legislative Committee as an ad hoc committee. So the Richland School District 2 Legislative Committee held its first meeting on October the 24th here at R2i2 in this very room. It is viewable, it was live streamed and viewable on our website. The meeting was called to order by myself, and we also had our board secretary, Tamika Washington, and our SCSBA delegate, Nikki Porter, at that meeting. I took a point of personal privilege at that time to take a civility pledge with our committee members, and that is something that we got from a civility resolution meeting that we had with SCSBA. The new item of business was presented in Exhibit A, the structure of the Legislative Committee and the board and the committee members. So we had a second meeting today, but the structure is set up, and I'm just going to read the scope just for sake of having it on record. This committee is established to review upcoming policies and proposed legislation from the South Carolina Congressional Office and federal government. We seek to determine a stance on current and future legislation that affects our district. We want to advocate for the best interests of our students' academic education and overall well-being and express those concerns and desires to our elected officials. We will review policy updates by following our policy review schedule and concerns of board members, staff, and community. We will commit to enact policies that best suit Richland School District 2 mission, vision, and values. The board members, or the committee members, are myself as the chair for the board legislative contact, also Ms. Rania Jameson as our vice chair, Ms. Melissa McFadden as our secretary. We have a teacher representative, Ms. Lisa Ellis, and we also have a parent representative, Mr. Larry Smalls. So at the first meeting, when it was Ms. Washington and Ms. Porter and myself, we reviewed 4 current bills that are on the floor right now that will be voted on or either passed in January. The first one is Senate Bill 743, Parental Rights, Senate Bill 181, Academic Standards, House Bill 3439, School Board Takeover, and House Bill 3295, Competency-Based Education. This afternoon, when I met with myself and Ms. Melissa McFadden and Rania Jameson, we reviewed policies or bills, Senate Bill 126, Charter School Accountability, House Bill 3726, Workforce Development, House Bill 3289, Alternative Education, and the new regulation that was spoke about this morning at the South Carolina Department of Education was Regulation 43170, the selection of instructional materials. So what we're planning to do with this is to go and dissect each of these because each of them have a long, lengthy bill, but they only have certain things that they're going to change. So what the committee is going to do is just take those things that are being changed and review them and bring it to the board for consideration of the different things that they're doing if we approve of them or if we agree with them. So we don't have a proviso 1.108 where we're having to go to the Supreme Court and contest things that are in a bill that we didn't get an opportunity to read or review. So we want to head that off. In the past, the Legislative Committee has just brought things to be discussed, but we actually want to take an active role and participate in the legislative process and say, these are the items and concerns and issues that our district is facing that we would like you as a congressional body to debate on and consider on our behalf instead of having them hand us the bills that they want to pass for us. We want to get ahead of it and give them bills that we want them to pass for us. So with that, again, so we have 3 recommendations right now. Actually, it's 2. And the first one is, as you all know, August of this year, parents pulled up to schools and there was no traffic officer there. And Dr. Moore has told us that if we want to do something about it, we're going to have to reach out to our federal government, state and local, and we are continuing to get the runaround. Ms. Debbie Moore has helped me draft a proposed resolution for that. Each of the board members do have a copy of that, and the resolution is child safety and traffic control in school zones. And so what we will be doing tonight, the board will be voting on this recommendation. If it passes, it will then go with what Mr. Trapp said to SCSBA for all of South Carolina school boards to vote on it. If it passes there, it will move on to the congressional delegation. But it reads, SCSBA believes an adult uniformed crossing guard or other personnel supervised by the school district should have the authority with training to stop traffic for the purposes of allowing vehicles in a school driveway or drop-off and pickup line to safely exit the road in the same manner as they stop traffic for students to safely cross the road to and from school. So the gist is that we have a uniformed officer, not necessarily a Class 3 officer, but someone that is trained. It could be someone that we hire in our district, anyone that has been trained to be at our schools to stop traffic like they have in the past. This will be hopefully the first and only year that we don't have someone out there to direct traffic at our schools. So that's the first recommendation. May I have a motion?
Mrs. McFadden, I think you should make a motion, one of us will second it.
That's fine. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to accept the Child Safety and Traffic Control in School Zones proposal to be sent to SCSBA Delegate Assembly to be voted on as the 2023-2024 resolution.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right. Motion was made by Mrs. McFadden and seconded by Mrs. Washington to adopt a resolution. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Trapp?
Mrs. Porter?
I would like, actually, no, not at this time. I'm good.
I would like to say that, and give a special thank you to Miss Debbie Elmore, who is the governmental director for SCSBA, who helped me craft this. I cannot take credit for this on my own. She has been running around and contacting as many people as she can to make sure we get this language correct. So I just want to say a special thank you to Miss Elmore.
Thank you. And I would like to just add that I have thought a lot about this, and I have read this, and I think it is worded very well, and I think it's something that we here in District 2 definitely need, and I hope that we can get this. I hope we can adopt this tonight here, and then I hope we can convince the rest of the School Board Association to go along with it.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Agostini.
And I just want to be clear. If we get the School Boards Association to go along, again, it's just a statement of belief. It does not impact any legislation.
Yes, that's correct. Or fortunately, depending how you look at it. Correct on the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, board members, please vote. The vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. Mrs. McFadden, do you?
Sorry.
Oh,
Mr. Trapp?
yes, ma'am. Ms. Porter.
I would like for us to discuss or possibly vote on a new scope for the legislative committee, or at least to see if the entire board is in agreement with the scope of the committee. My secondary motion to this. That was
I don't know that would be appropriate at the time. We do have a discussion in a few minutes about committees, and that might be a good time to bring that up.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. McFadden, do you have a continue?
I do have a second recommendation. So there's a lot of information I did not get that I hoped that I would, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and pose this to the board. I've provided everyone with a winter celebration, memo. And I would like to move to instruct administration to send out the winter celebration invitation to our legislative delegation and prepare for other festivities.
Is there a second?
Second.
Was,
No, it was not. It was not be supported.
is there any discussion?
Yes,
Mr.
Mr. Trapp.
Dr. Scott?
Yes. The only reason why I'm not able to support that at this time, as I did my research, looking at the calendar and the schedule of many of the elected officials, December is not a very friendly time for them to come and have the interaction with us. I had the opportunity to speak to many because I wanted to extend invitation to them as well if this was to pass, and many have already made commitments. A lot of times with our senators, our House members, and even county councils, purposely that night they have a special call board meeting. So it will not, but the purpose of this celebration in December is for us to build relationships and to have those conversations with other elected officials. Many of them, and I would say them, will not be available that day. I would like to propose that we have more conversation on this and we get together as a collective board and we look at the calendars of the school board as well as the calendar of elected officials when they go back in January, and we come up with a feasible date and time that we will be able to get what we are trying to get out of it, and that is to build relationships and have conversations. So because of that, I would not be able to support the date for December of this year. But thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Agostini?
Thank you. I too also will not be able to support this. I appreciate all the efforts of Mrs. McFadden. Two of my biggest concerns, one, a budget has not been established for this committee. And then secondly, in January, annually, our Teachers Forum puts together with Richland 1, pastries and policies or policies and pastries. But it's the same idea. I'd like to use that as a launching pad for us to see what type of direction we'd like to go into when we want to do. I'm not opposed to the idea, just the timing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yes, Mr. Trapp.
Ms. McFadden?
I appreciate that, and I did hear the sentiments of my board members before I made this. However, we're talking about House of Representatives, we're talking about senators, we're talking about county councils, we're talking about other people that I'm not going to name on here because I'm not sure if this is going to pass. However, as we all know, all of them are very busy, and someone looked at me the other day and said, if you're going to do what you're going to do, you need to go ahead and do it, because there's no way you're going to get 2 lawyers and all their staff and all their people together in one place at a time. And I understand that because, even with an event that has been held, a lot of people agreed and they're not able to show up. So if we're expecting all the representatives, all of this list that will not have an opportunity to come and speak with us and have dinner with us because all of the representatives, senators, and county council can't be there. I do know that county council does have a meeting, and I spoke with several of the members, and they said that's okay because there's always going to be something that everybody's not going to be able to make. And I'm not so foolish to think that all of them are going to attend a Richland 2 dinner from 4 to 5 on a Tuesday night. And so my concern were the other people that don't have those types of titles that would be missing out on an opportunity to sit down with us. And then the other portion of other festivities that I would like to have for our community that is clumped in together. It is December. It is the last board meeting of the year. And I was on the doors open. We're ready to move forward with what we have as some can come. I do respect Ms. Agostini's point about the budget. I've asked for a budget for weeks now. I haven't received that, so I can't understand the portion of that. And how that would go. I have not received that information, but today was the last day that I would be able to get the board to vote on that. And I'm not opposed to pastries and policies, but that's for the teachers. I'm a board member. That's the first I heard about it was when Miss Maria Owens told me about it. So to expect or to think that community members and other people would know about policies and pastries with teachers is not something that the community would know about, or even would they be invited to it, because like I said, I've been on the board for 3 years, and that's the first I ever heard of it. So I would like to move forward. I would ask my board members to support me in this, because all we're doing is saying, hey, if you're available, please come join us. Have a sit down. Let's do the festivities. If not, I completely understand, and I'm on board for anything and at any time that they want to bring something to the board for us to do with the community.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
The Chair, I have one if no one else has
Yes, Dr.
anything to
Scott.
say. Yes, and I completely understand what Mrs. McFadden is stating, but I think one other concern that I have, the list is not a list where we collectively as a board had an opportunity to share other organizations. For an example, on the list, Palmetto Teachers Association. Well, we also have the South Carolina Education Association. So I think when we're talking about completing a list, we need to make sure that we open this door to all organizations. And the only way to be able to do that is to have conversations collectively with all board members to talk about, well, now let's invite their counterparts. So I think it's just so many missing links to who the invitation has been extended to, that we really need to have this, but not at the time that is designated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. And you and I emailed back and forth about that, and I told you, thank you for letting me know about the counterpart, because I was unaware of it, and they would definitely get an invitation. So this is not blocked off specifically for the people that I put on this list. However, for the sake of a budget and for the sake of being able to submit this, when I spoke to all board members, no one else sent anything until after it was already basically coming to the floor to be spoke about. So I don't mind adding anybody to this list or taking anyone from the list. I have absolutely no problem with that. Was to go ahead and send out the invitation to this year, but I understand if we need to wait till 2024 or 2025, whenever you guys decide that we want to go ahead and do this legislative meetup for it's not just for our delegation. Like I said, it was extended to a lot of other people.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden, is that correct on the screen?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right, board members, please vote. So the motion fails. We will now move on to item 10.1. The next agenda item is a report on the first quarter pupil services. Dr. Moore.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce Dr. Shalaya Burnett-Lyle, Director of Pupil Services.
Mr. Chair, board members, Dr. Moore, community, thank you so much for your time today. I'm here to present to you the first quarter pupil services report, where we go through disciplinary data in our district. So of course, the information has been sent to you all ahead of time regarding level 1, 2, and 3 infractions. And we have some slight decreases in first quarter for level 1, slight increases for level 2. This is first quarter this year compared to last year, and slight decreases in level 3. And going through the disaggregated data, a couple of points that I thought you would be interested in, because this is more holistic. First of all, I thought that you would be really interested to know about weapons. So if you look at the disaggregated data on weapons, it may appear that weapons have increased, and technically that's the case. But if you dig through the data, you will see that a great majority of the weapons are like pepper spray. And so the the metal detectors, are working. Level 3 offenses have been going through metal detectors, they work at night, they carry pepper spray, and based on our matrix, that's still a level 3 violation. So I just want to assure you all and the public that based on our data, the information is showing that the metal detectors indeed at the high school level are working. Another thing to highlight are level 2 for tobacco violations. We have increased quite a bit in tobacco violations. There was a previous board meeting where we mentioned vaping. Vaping is a nationwide concern. It is highly alarming. There have been many discussions about it, and it appears that in high school, in addition to the metal detectors working to aid in the prevention of weapons, metal detectors are also helping to aid in the detection of vapes. Our level 1, 2, and 3 infractions in terms of, and it's always in school, out of school, and expulsion data typically are very much aligned to infractions. I always want to point out that expulsions, whereas we see here, these data are per incident. So one incident might represent several students, whereas here, when we go to discipline data, that is actually per student, if that makes sense. So if it's one fight, hypothetically, on the infractions, then if it's 2 students, you might have 2 out-of-school suspensions. I hope that makes sense, so that you can see that there is a difference between the infraction data and the actual disciplinary action data. All right. You will see here, we know that fighting has been a big talk. As you see, our data is reflecting that we have a decrease in fighting this year as compared to last year, and last year as compared to the previous year. One of the things that I had to reflect on is my initial years, which is a very long time ago at this point in administration, when that was before social media. And that was a time where administrators had an opportunity to intervene ahead of time. You kind of got to know, you saw in the schools, you heard the students talking and arguing, and you got an opportunity to stop it. But with the reality of social media, one of the things that I do want to highlight, some of the trends that we're seeing over time, is that the influence of social media, unfortunately, sometimes fights have been planned before the students even show up on campus. And so the scope, the influence of families and children in the community has been quite a challenge. But again, our data is showing, in spite of that our number of fights for first quarter, and I hope I share the same with you when I come back for second quarter, so far our data is showing that we're decreasing in the number of fights. Okay. So, of course, we always take an opportunity to highlight some of the things that as a district that we're doing to be proactive to address discipline. And MTSS is a framework that all states at this point have, and we actually don't have Tier 4 here in our district. We have Tier 4 for students with disabilities, but Tier 1, 2, and 3, that is our framework that we have adopted in Richland School District 2. And so, as always, I bring friends with me to highlight some of the things that we do proactively to try to avoid discipline. And this is a special one, because usually when we present, we talk about some district-wide approaches. Just want to drop a nugget on you. Dr. Suber sent in a board brief about conscious discipline, which would also be a district-wide approach, Tier 1, to students. But I think you all know that schools also have their individual and unique opportunities to provide Tier 1 and 2 and 3 strategies for students. And so this is a very unique opportunity here at Richland Northeast with Serve and Connect. And I just want to say, I want to highlight this. This came from former interim superintendent and current chief academic officer, Mrs. Nancy Gregory. This Serve and Connect is a relatively new partnership between nonprofit, Serve and Connect, and Richland Northeast. And it's a formal partnership specifically to promote the safety and well-being of students. Mrs. Nancy Gregory said the following: "Serve and Connect's mission resonates deeply with our own as we believe in fostering positive relationships and mutual trust among all members of our community. Together, we implement comprehensive programs and initiatives designed to secure an environment that promotes learning and personal growth both inside our schools and in the area surrounding our schools. One of the key focus areas of this partnership will be collaboration. It is essential to emphasize that this partnership is not just about safety and security, it is about strengthening the fabric of our community." So with that being said, I'll turn the presentation over at this time to our Serve and Connect representatives, if you'd like to make a few comments, and afterwards we will have Richland Northeast members make a few comments.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here with you all, and thank you to all the faculty, administration, and to our school board members. Thank you for all that you do. And as a Richland 2 family, from my family to yours, thank you for everything that you do. So a little bit to give context to the work that I'm going to present about Serve and Connect. As a reminder, we are a nonprofit organization with the mission of fostering positive change through sustainable police and community partnerships. And it's an organization that I founded after my husband, Greg, who was a police officer with the city of Forest Acres and also a Richland 2 alum, was killed in the line of duty on September 30th of 2015. And so at Serve and Connect, we have a variety of different programs, but one of them is called Compass. And Compass is the framework that we use to support effective police and community collaboration. Essentially, we work with police and citizen partners to help develop locally driven movements where they're working together as one team, one community to tackle big challenges and to create safe, thriving communities for us all. We believe that those who live and serve in the community know what the greatest needs are and are best equipped to make that difference. And so about 2 years ago, I was contacted by Forest Lake Presbyterian Church, which is just right down the road. It's very close to Forest Lake Elementary School. And they had an interest in wanting to do more to build bridges throughout the community, especially the communities in Dentsville and Woodfield neighborhoods. And so we began the process of phase 1 of Compass. So Compass occurs across 4 phases. And that begins with a process of deep listening and learning where we seek to more deeply understand what are the greatest needs in a community, what are the opportunities, who are those that are actively involved and already making a difference, and where can we further strengthen those bonds? And from a very, very early time in this process, we learned of the incredible leadership at Richland School District 2 and have been working very closely since we began to launch the Compass initiative, which now has become the Decker Collective, which we are proud to launch on October 28th at Richland Northeast High School. But through this deep listening and learning process, we began to hear different families in the R&E cluster. And as we began on that process, typically in Compass, we wait until later on to implement evidence-based strategies or evidence-informed strategies as well. But I truly saw an opportunity to integrate one of the other programs that we've been proud to support that emerged through our Compass work in Camden, South Carolina, and that is Make It a Conversation. And I'm joined here today by my friend and colleague, Mr. Brian Mays. And so I met Brian. He was the executive director, or is, of the Jackson Teen Center in Camden, and I learned early on that when we were doing work, I needed to know Mr. BB, as he's affectionately called. And as we began to build our friendship and partnership, I saw what a gift he has truly with young people, especially middle and high school students. And as we talked more, he shared about a vision he had for Make It a Conversation, wanting to make sure that his students, if they were to be pulled over or to be in a challenging circumstance, that they would be equipped to be able to make it a conversation, to keep themselves and others involved in that instance safe. And so we talked about relaunching that program when we did successfully in Camden, but when I heard the voices of our students in the R&E cluster, especially at Richland Northeast High School, saw an opportunity to bring that program to R&E. And thanks to the incredible leadership, we have loved working with Mr. Sims, Dr. Aldridge, Dr. Myers, so many of the faculty at R&E, and especially Ms. Cherry, saw an opportunity to bring R&E, and it's been a tremendous experience. Every chance that I have to go visit on Thursdays during first and second lunch, it is a joy to get to know these students and how it translates into our community work as well. We hosted an event this weekend where we served about 300 residents, mostly from that Woodfield neighborhood. And one of our Make It a Conversation students, Jeremiah, he is so sharp and such a leader, and how he showed up wanting to help. And he talked about how he's looking for other opportunities to get employment to help out with his track and the payments related to his sports and to help out with his family. And just what a smart, amazing young person. And he is just one of many that we're so thankful to be able to stand alongside. And I do want to give Mr. Mays an opportunity to share as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I really hate coming up this late because I'm looking at the faces and everybody's ready to go home. And I'm glad y'all smiled because I was really scared there for a minute. But Make It a Conversation, it actually started as an initiative in about 2014 when we were having so many police shootings. And so the whole thing is that how do we make this a safe place? This is just going to be a conversation, and we teach the students how to, certain techniques to make sure that we can talk. If you can make it home safe, then we can talk about whatever it is. And then it expanded into many other conversations. I want to say right now that it has been myself and my wife, we picked up some work that my father started in the 70s at the Atlanta child murders. He's always believed, he's 84 years old, we just celebrated his birthday on Sunday, and he always believed that it is so, that if we have a discussion, healing starts with a conversation, and we're just continuing this work. But I must tell you, we've been doing a lot of work in Camden. We have about 275 students we serve per day, and we have 90% that go to college or the military. But I will tell you, Richland Northeast is special. The staff, the kids, it is just amazing. And they call and check on me if they think I'm gonna be late. Are you coming today? And I get fussed at. But it's just an amazing, we do some incredible exercises of communicating with yourself, and I can't take credit for this because this is an assignment that my wife created, where we go back and we get a picture of you 5 years ago, and you have a discussion with yourself. What decisions did you make then, and how would you counsel yourself, onto what you would do better. So again, I am going to shut up so you guys can go home, but I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, and speaking on behalf of my wife, but Make It a Conversation, we just thank you for allowing us, thinking enough of us to allow us in your school and to your children's lives. We love them. We'll never walk out on them. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Trapp, and to the entire Richland 2 Board of Trustees, to our Superintendent, Dr. Moore, and to the entire Richland 2 family. I'm William Clark. I'm an Assistant Administrator at Richland Northeast High School. On behalf of Principal Mark Sims and the entire Richland Northeast High School community, I'm here to speak about the impact that Serve and Connect has made in our learning community. We're extremely excited about our partnership with Serve and Connect, and I'd like to highlight a few successes and opportunities that partnership has created. Number one, it's created a safe platform for our students to have their voices activated, not just to be heard, but to activate their voice, to give them a place to come and speak. The discussions that take place in those meetings, if you could hear them, you would understand that it is truly apparent that students feel safe sharing their experiences and talking about their experiences. Number two is help us build a stronger connection to the outside community. For example, Serve and Connect brought in Leadership Columbia to get our students input for a community project that they are working on. Number three, it's created communications of transparency between adults and students. It helps us to keep a finger on the pulse of what our students are thinking and feeling. All of this progress aligns with MTSS and further strengthens our Tier 1 and 2 support systems. Just to give you a few references of points of impact, we are proud to report that because of the relationship with Serve and Connect and other school initiatives that fall under MTSS, over 80% of our students have not received a referral of any kind at Richland Northeast this year. That includes major and minor incidents. We are also elated to report that a significant increase from last year to this year in the number of students who made the Principal's Honor Roll and the AB Honor Roll. We increased 31.5% to 409 students overall on the Honor Roll list. And I'll keep it short and sweet as well, but I'd like to just close out by saying that we've all heard the cliche of, it takes a village. However, we also know that there's a tremendous amount of learning that goes on in our community for our students. Serve and Connect has helped to sustain that village within our school community, and we're excited and look forward to a continued partnership with them. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Burnett Lyle. Board members, are there any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
thank you so much for the pupils, for the updates on our students. I wanted to know in particular, how are we addressing bullying? Because this is something that we are seeing as a board come up very frequently. And so I would like to hear, what are we seeing? What are we doing? What are protocols? And can we as a district send a very strong message to our students and our families that this is something that we are not going to tolerate? I really hope that we don't just brush this off to the side, but when we see, appeal after appeal, and there's something in there regarding someone feeling like they have to protect themselves, then I want us to really start looking and taking that into consideration.
Yes, ma'am. So the question, let me first address where we are in terms of data. Okay, when we look at the disabling, we don't see a lot of individual reports. It looks like it's about 10 total that bullying was founded, right? And that's elementary, middle, and high school. Now, to your point, there are a lot of parents and students who state that they have been bullied. There is a very clear bullying protocol that all schools are expected to adhere to. I have the pleasure of training administrators every year on it, and it is a protocol that administrators are expected to go through within 48 hours of any reports of bullying. It involves a full investigation from the alleged victim, any alleged perpetrator information, and what is being received will determine if the bullying has been founded or not. Now, sometimes, Mrs. Schuler-Washington, it may be a situation where the bullying hasn't fully been founded based on investigation, but it's enough information to say, okay, these students need to be separated. In those instances, my experience with many students, both as a district administrator and as a parent, is no contact contracts that schools put in place are highly effective. And again, I switch between the two as a parent and a district administrator. When you put a no contact contract in place, even if you can't move through the bullying protocol to say it's founded, schools can separate students. You can't talk to each other, about each other, through ech other, and that's through any means. And when those no-nos come in place, then you have a bit of leverage to be able to at least separate when you can't find any confirmations of bullying. But, so that is some of the things that schools are doing. When bullying is founded, it is a level 3 violation, and that means that usually, most times, a recommendation for expulsion is expected. Now, there is sometimes, especially in the elementary school, they like to use learning, first and counseling. But most of the time with bullying, if it is founded, then the students do indeed come through our office, and at minimum, they are required to go through family intervention services, might be Blythewood Academy or expulsion. So I know I gave a lot of information, but is that sufficient?
Mr. Trapp?
Board members, any other questions? Ms. Porter?
Yes, in the conversation of bullying, as I've visited a few of the middle schools and high schools, I noticed that we often post that poster of the Let's Talk poster where students' parents can report anything that's of concern, and it's all located on our website. And I think that's a great opportunity for students to report bullying as well, just to ensure that they have the documentation and paperwork that follows up with the occurrence. I would love for more conversations to be had about that tool. I know they have morning shows and news broadcasts because sometimes when you see things on the wall, they just kind of blend in with the wall, but perhaps more about what tools we have in place for those students to sort of like wave their hands in the air saying, I need help.
Yes. What I hear you saying is that additional communication and conversations. Schools are expected to meet with students and faculty at least once a year, but perhaps based on the information that you are receiving, that those conversations need to occur more frequently and be more transparent. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Agostino.
And my comments sort of go along with my two colleagues. We've seen since COVID, now that we're coming up between Thanksgiving and Christmas, the past few years, there's an increase in bad decisions. Are we doing something, or can we do something to remind, to make better choices and what the bad choices are and the consequences?
All schools have a lot of flexibility in how they address current needs. Like I can speak for Westwood, and I know that they have community meetings, and I'm saying Westwood, but I want to say other high schools do that as well, where they have community meetings and they'll bring students together. I would say that within my role, I couldn't say for certainty individual schools and what they are doing. Certainly Dr. Moore or Mr. Smith, if you have anything to add, you can, but what I do hear is that perhaps there may be a recommendation for additional conversations to happen about better decision-making. And yes, this is a popular time, unfortunately, in schools across to make not so good decisions.
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Moore.
we do have principal meeting coming up next week, and we will definitely remind our leaders to remind our students to make better choices, because we do recognize when students are out of school for an extended period of time, things that flare up in the community tend to come back onto the school campus. And that's where we see a lot of the challenges that our students or that our leaders and our teachers are dealing with, is they start in the community, the students bring them to school with them, and because everyone's in the school, that's where they tend to try to resolve those. So we can definitely bring that message as a reminder to our leaders next week at the principal meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Board members, any other questions?
Mr. Trapp, I just want to say thank you to the young lady who spoke. I do remember, and for your advocacy in doing something about it and seeing something and actually putting work into it. So we appreciate what you're doing. And Mr. Beebe and wife, we just want to say thank you for traveling from Camden to come and speak to our students. And I like making a conversation because I have 3 boys, and my first one's already driving. I got 2 more coming. And my thing that I tell them is, I don't care what they say, you abide and get home. When you get home, we will take it from there and do what we need to do. So make it a conversation. I appreciate that. And just the goal is to get our boys back home, and our girls too. And then from there, anything that goes awry. And I appreciate the cooperation with the police department that are serving and connecting with our students, and so that our children, when they do get pulled over, they don't have a fear and they're not jumpy. They're able to move forward. That way they can make it home. So I appreciate what y'all are doing in our community, because in the community when they're out driving and they're out with their families, and then they can handle it appropriately and then make it back to school and to home. So thank you guys so much for coming and staying all this time. We appreciate you.
Any other questions, board members?
And for Mr. Sims and his department, thank you for allowing them to come in and speak with your students and having the door open and available for people to come in. We appreciate you for doing that.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Burnett and Lyle. We appreciate that. The next agenda item in this section is a report on the first quarter financial report. Dr. Moore.
Mr. Chair, I would like to introduce Ms. Nancy Williams, our Senior Chief Financial Officer. And before Ms. Williams gives her update, I do want to let the board know today at Leadership Columbia, which was Education Day, Ms. Williams reviews for her presentation on school finance and funding, and that's how I learned all about Act 388 was today. And she did a great job.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members. I stand before you to provide a first quarter financial update. So I draw your attention to page 1 of the document. So based upon the $359.6 million budget adopted for fiscal year 24 at the end of the first quarter, we had received $43.4 million in revenue from state and local sources, which equates to about collection. Once we make the from EIA, which is that second item under the state section, we will be trending right on track with our percentage of revenue received as compared to this point last year. So once we make that transfer, we will be trending as expected. On page 2 of the report, as it relates to general fund expenditures as of the end of the first quarter, we've expended $64.9 million, which equates to roughly 18% of budgeted expenditures. This trends perfectly to where we were at this same time in fiscal year 23, 22, 21, and even pre-COVID back in FY19. When you consider encumbrances, which is 23.57, is slightly higher than it has been in the prior 4 fiscal years, but we can attribute that to offices going ahead and being proactive in entering and establishing POs to avoid ratifications. So no real issue there. Okay. Page 3 of the report relates to the Education Improvement Act, revenues and expenditures. When we look at the revenue received, about 28% of the budgeted revenue has been received to date. Well, as of the end of the first quarter, 25% of those funds have been expended as of the end of the first quarter. So we're right on track. I draw your attention to 377 teacher supplies. There appears to be a negative balance there. Stayed after the November 30th reconciliation to get additional revenue there. Okay. On page 4 of the report, which relates to special revenue, it primarily consists of federal awards and state restricted amounts. At the end of September, we were still working on several plan approvals through the state and waiting on grant award notifications. So the budget revenues and expenditures are a little lower than this time last year. You'll notice several negative amounts for Title I, CTE, programs like that. We have preliminary amounts. That's why things look a little different, but we fully expect the revenue to come in. Title I last year, we received over $6.7 million. For CTE, over 340,000 delays, and that's why you see some of the negatives. the school board budget. So of the $450,538 budget for the Board of Trustees, to date, $115,711 has been expended, which represents 25.7% of the budgeted expenditures. You'll notice on the far right-hand column, the negative balance in the other column. That relates to a part of that, the overwhelming majority of that actually relates to a PO for the superintendent search fund that need funded. So once that's liquidated, then you will see that go back in. And then the final page of the report relates to an update on the referendum funding of the $468.4 million budgeted for the referendum projects of 2018. $367 million was expended as of September 30th, 2023. When you consider outstanding encumbrances of $94.3 million, then $6.9 million remains to complete projects. Mr. Chair, I'm available if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Board members, are there any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Agostini.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and you hit on some of the key points, Ms. Williams, that I had talked to Dr. Moore about. But help me understand, when we're doing revenue budgeted, if we're anticipating to get these funds, whether it be, the federal grants or whatever, why would that not be in the budget if it's an expectation that we're going to get this money?
So with some of the federal awards, we get notifications at various times. We may get an initial allocation, then later on we get an increased allocation. And again, with those federal funds, everything is on a reimbursement basis anyway. And so normally we have to incur the expenditures first, then submit the budgeted amount increase as well as the revenue side.
Okay, so what I'm from?
So in the case of the two programs that I discussed, Title I and like CTE, Subfund 207, in the unforeseen event that we wouldn't get enough money for Title I, which is highly unlikely, then we would have to cover it from the general fund. But again, that's highly unlikely.
Okay, and thank you. And my final question is, looking at the referendum money and that we have $6 million, $7 million left, is that enough money to finish the projects that we have?
No, okay, so this is just straight money from the actual referendum. There has been some additional funding that we received from bond premiums, and we're anticipating that as we continue to complete those referendum projects out through, I believe, 26, that we will strategize on a plan to funding the remaining projects. Right now, we're estimating maybe the need for an additional $10 to $12 million to complete those projects.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Williams.
Board members, any other questions? All right, well, thank you. Mrs. Williams, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to introduce Ms. LaWanna Lee Robinson, our director. She's making me laugh, I'm sorry. Our director for procurement, because we also, as a part of our financial report, want to give the board an update on our procurement practices.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Just real briefly, want to give some summarization of what we did last fiscal year. We issued roughly 9,500 purchase orders that totaled about $248 million. We advertised 35 contracts and awarded out of those 35 contracts to 59 vendors. Those contracts included pressure washing services, on-call HVAC services, fire suppression, access control. We had roughly 22,444 P-card transactions, and our P-card spend last fiscal year was $7.7 million. And for our P-cards, our count, we're trending at 195 cards. Our card holders include senior leadership team, our principals, chiefs, executive directors, athletic directors, our support services team, we had a slight uptick due to our 2021 procurement audit, where they gave us the finding that we had cars in department names, they need to be in individual names. So we have increased 33 cars in support services for our maintenance folks there and our AP team. Current fiscal spend as of October 31st is $2 million roughly. And we still conduct P-cards training as needed when we have new P-card holders. We conduct trainings when it is deemed necessary by leadership and/or procurement services. On the cusp of what Ms. Williams was speaking about with federal monies, the South Carolina Department of Education provided guidance back to all districts retro back to July 1, where we are not allowed to use our procurement exemptions for federal monies. So that means that previously, if we had federal monies and we needed professional development done, we can refer to an exemption and have that service done. Now we have to compete any monies that we get from the federal government. And that competition may be in a state contract. We may have to get multiple quotes. We may even have to do something that's more on a formal basis. So we are handling this in procurement. We have a dedicated procurement specialist that is strictly doing federal procurements. In that, she's making sure that we are doing the sam.gov check to make sure that our vendors are not suspended or debarred. There's also an option that we can submit a non-competitive procurement form to the South Carolina Department of Education to not compete a particular project. So in that, we will do the using office, so our internal customers will send that form in. We will do the market research to make sure it makes sense before we send it up to that appropriate program office for approval. We have been sending those non-competitive procurement forms to SCDE, the appropriate departments, and knock on wood, we have not had one denied. So it's a little bit of bottleneck with federal monies now because we have to do a little bit more due diligence for that pot of money.
And can I add to that, Mr. Chair? This was a misinterpretation at the Department of Education, State Department of Education, around the rules. And so superintendents were notified of this in July at our roundtable, that the new directives would be coming down. So this was not a Richland 2 issue, this was a statewide issue.
All right, thank you. Is there any questions from board members?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Washington.
I do have a question. I don't know if this falls under procurement or under finances, but if a vendor is told that we don't work with third-party vendors, what does that mean in terms of procurement?
I don't know what that means in terms of procurement. We work with everybody. So what procurement does, our competition is open, fair, and transparent. We don't exclude anyone. So if a vendor was informed that we don't do we don't work with third parties, I really don't know what that means.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Agostini.
I have one more question. It's actually for Ms. Williams. Are we on target, on schedule to get the audit in December 1st?
Did it go?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
All right, any other questions, board members? Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, the next agenda item in this section is a policy revision regarding policy BJ, the board legislative program. Mrs. McFadden, I'll turn time over to you.
So again, we're going to bring this policy. I had suggested to bring it to scratch out the National School Board Association because we're no longer a member of that organization. So I would like to make a motion to amend policy BJ, Board Legislative Program, to mark out the National School Board Association.
All right, I don't think we would need to take a motion tonight. This would be considered the first reading, I think.
Okay, thanks.
And at the next board meeting, it'll be an action item.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Agostini.
I have a question as it pertains to paragraph number 2, and actually, I guess what the responsibility of the board legislative contact person is. because my understanding was that the board legislative contact will be, based upon a board vote, able to go and talk on behalf of the board. Is that correct?
To be honest, I haven't looked at the policy in a few weeks. I'm not sure.
So the SCSBA did give us a rundown of that. So basically, it's not necessarily that the board has to vote, it's just basically choosing like what you guys did before on August the 22nd. And it's not that I'm the only one that can go and talk to legislators, but it's basically, it's a point of contact for your school board on legislative matters, establishing positive and working relationships with state representatives, senators, and state board of education members, attending training seminars and various legislative issues, the SCSBA Legislative Advocacy Conference, their day at the Capitol, providing monthly reports on the legislative session, working with district administration and board members about the local impact of on pending legislation, passing board resolutions and supporting and opposing legislation, organizing letter writing campaigns, and legislators with participants. And the list goes on and on.
Okay, and I don't want to interrupt. I'm just talking, and if I can just, so, because I appreciate all that you're saying, but my concern or my question is, paragraph number 2 says, therefore, board members will keep themselves informed of pending legislation and through its chairman actively communicate board positions and concerns to elected representatives at both the state and national levels. And that was, my understanding was also going to be the board legislative contact person. So if that is in fact part of your job, and if it's not, that's fine, then we would need to include that or amend this policy to include that. And we all do know that we can all speak to our elected officials as individuals, just when you're speaking on behalf of the board. But that was what I was seeking to get clarification for, if that was part of the responsibility of the board legislative contact person.
Yeah, I don't have any insight on that, but we definitely should look into it.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Porter.
It does sound like, based on Ms. McFadden's definitions outlined with SCSBA, that we would need to change that wording, or at least to say that the chair or the legislative contact in line 2 of paragraph 2.
Okay, well, I think that we'll need to edit that, and or if we want to add to that, we need to do it before the next board meeting. Or is there any further questions or concerns? All right, the next agenda item in this section is the board self-evaluation summary. Last Friday, November 10th, during our board workshop, the board completed a self-evaluation which encompassed 6 different dimensions of board competency and successful board practices. Those dimensions were contextual, educational, interpersonal, analytical, political, and strategic. This comprehensive self-evaluation pointed out areas and themes on which the board needs to focus for growth. To that end, the board established norms for our meetings, and they got into groups to more deeply analyze the results of our self-evaluation under each of those dimensions. We have proudly developed our new goals for the 2023-2024 school year and intend to focus on those as we move forward in our efforts to work more cohesively as a team. At all times, our focus is on doing what is in the best interest of each and every one of our Richland 2 students. And at this time, do we have, well, we'd like to share our norms as well as our board goals with the community. Do you, if you would put the norms up there. And we're not going to read through these, but just so everyone knows what this is a list of basically, I would consider somewhat of a code of ethics maybe for the board to use as we interact with each other in the community, especially our board meetings. And if you would put up the board goals, and I'll read through them. It's just 6 of those, and I'll read through them. But these are the 6 goals that we established in relationship to the specific categories we talked about earlier. Goal 1, at least quarterly, the board will tackle issues facing schools by including a report from a student advisor, teacher forum, and administrators during a board meeting or work session. Number 2, the board will institute its norms during each board meeting effective November 14th, 2023, as evidenced through board members' actions. Number 3, by March 2024, the board will develop a vision based on the strategic plan for where the district will be in 5 years. We will then use this information to set our organizational priorities for the year ahead and review it annually. Number 4, 2 opportunities will be provided for board members to engage with county council and legislative bodies to advocate for our organizational priorities and to meet our goals for the district. Number 5, the board will conduct quarterly self-evaluations to ensure effective performance toward the board's goals. And number 6, the board will work collaboratively to make solution-based decisions that are for the benefit of all stakeholders using established norms. Board members, are there any comments or anything you'd like to add to that? All right, the next item on our agenda is a discussion of policy BDE, board committees. This item was requested to be on the agenda so we could talk about our committees and how are there any concerns, questions, or comments you'd like to make?
Mr. Chair?
Mrs. Agostini.
Yeah, I followed up with a email that Dr. Scott had sent asking for this to be discussed. For me, I've only heard, but it's not been confirmed by different colleagues, and my big concern is about the legislative committee and who the members are and how it all came to be. My understanding was you made it an ad hoc committee. I sent an email to you. I don't think that I got an answer, but in the past, it's always been a standing committee. And I was concerned, based upon the information, we've always had the chief of communications and our chief financial officer with this, with the legislation, because it's so important what the General Assembly is doing. And then our chief of communications has always been very helpful in summarizing the current legislation. So, I have concerns that it's not a standing committee, and then I'm hearing that other people are added to the committee that I was not informed of.
Okay, thank you. If Mrs. McFadden, if you can shed some light on this. I believe earlier in your committee meeting, you had discussed that in the future we should make this a standing committee. That was our object. Is that what I?
Yes, sir. So in the beginning, and when I proposed this to you in January, Ms. Agostini, when you were chair, I wanted it to be a standing committee. However, due to time constraints and other responsibilities, we needed to make this an ad hoc committee so that we could move forward with getting the work of the legislative committee done. We were September before we could even get it on the agenda because of other things. Go ahead and move it forward with an ad hoc committee. And at the bottom, it is clear that the intent is to, in June of 2023, that this, or excuse me, 2024, that this will be initiated as a standing committee. But seeing as how we're meeting, the legislative delegation is going to be in session in January, we needed to go ahead and move forward with the work that we need to do. And I did speak with another veteran member of the board and who stated that the way that it's normally done and our norms that we talked about, that we stated that we weren't going to do things the way they were normally done just because they're done this way. So moving forward, instead of just going through the legislation that is provided for us, I wanted to move forward with actually looking at the legislation before it is passed. So we've decided to do it this way. Nidra, our executive assistant, is still on the list, and so it's going to be a rotating administrative staff to help with it. Now, I did have to go and find other members of the community. However, they were already on the original proposal that I submitted to be on the committee. However, their names weren't, and I requested for all board members to send me names of people that they would want to be on the committee. And I did receive some names, and the names that I received, I went ahead and put them on the committee because, and I had board members tell me, this is such a robust idea that we have to do, that we can't do it alone. I had board members that decided that it was so much work that they were not able to commit to it once they seen what we were really up against. And as you said, it is a lot. So I've got 5 other people in the community that are going to help with this, along with our staff. I don't want our staff to constantly just be doing this, because the amount of work that is required, it is a lot. And I do have a month to get this done, because it is important work, because I receive that we have no idea about them. Class 3 officers, for one, 2014, that has been sitting on the books, and no one has known about it. Or if they knew about it, they didn't say anything about it. And so now we're rushing to try to get this done. And my goal is prevention is better than the cure. So if we have to sit through here and go through all of these together, I'm willing to do that. So that's why I have asked other members to join me and help me with this. Now the members are, I think I've said it before, Renea Jameson, Lisa Ellis, Larry Smalls, and Melissa McFadden. These are all people that are, if we hear their names, some of us may be like, oh yeah, I've heard that name before. Yes, because all these people ran for an office last year except for one. These people are all, so I don't want to get everybody that sways one way or the other. I wanted to make sure that all voices in our community were able to be held. And I believe that the team that we have assembled for this committee is able to do that.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden. I think we should definitely, obviously, there's some interest in this committee being formulated a little differently in the future. I'm of the opinion that right now we should keep going as we are, just because we are accomplishing things and we're getting things done, but we certainly can make this a standing committee next school year and revamp it if that's what the board wishes.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Porter.
I would like us to consider some of the wording within this policy and to make it so that it is reliant on you coming back to the board to get approval for things. A lot of the decisions that were made, I believe, were made without input from all, and then you hear about it later. And it being that you're in the community, you're having conversation, or a member of the delegation to give me a call about something that a committee is doing and I not be aware of it. So, and especially like when it changed from a standing to an ad hoc, all of that happened between 1 or 2 people, and I think we need to change some of the wording so that some of these decisions come back so that it is a mission of the board. All of our committees are supposed to be doing work for the board. However, if only one person makes the decision and doesn't call every board member to seek that this is what you, for example, the scope or the purpose of the committee, if all of us don't give input on that, then you're not doing the work of the board. You're doing the work of just you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, hold on.
No, it's Angela.
Okay, Mrs. Nash, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I think that I'll be honest, I'm slightly confused because I do believe that the IG committee ran. I didn't hear a lot of people asking us a lot of questions about a lot of things. It was more typically you bring the things to the board meeting for us to vote on and have input on. Of course, the communication is definitely there, but I do believe that we did get emails. I do believe that Ms. McFadden also said this in public with the whole thing laid out as well. And I did receive emails asking for input, and I believe that you guys did as well. And so I'm really confused that we're saying that we did not get asked input, because that doesn't seem to be what I've seen in emails to the board asking for input, and she actually stated, my understanding from just here is that it was stated that she previously asked for people to do this, and then everybody, myself included, because we were doing so much, said that we could not do it the way that it was done. And at that time, she was looking for 1 or 2 people to be a part of that. I myself could be a part of it because of a lot of things going on as well. And so we postponed it to now, and then what was suggested by administration, I guess, from what I'm hearing here, is that we do it as an ad hoc committee because we do have work to do. We do have things to get done. But I think that for everybody's sake, that we all should maybe have somebody come in and do a review of how committees actually work, because I think there's, again, the problem we are having here is the definitions of how those things work, whether it's ad hoc or whether it's a standing committee, but how subcommittees work. This has not been my experience. And even in looking into them, as far as it pertains to the board, yes, there's a lot of communication from that chairperson, but I don't remember us calling and asking like a million questions about IG, nor do I remember them providing us with a ton of information in the middle. You guys kind of made decisions, and then you had conversations, then you brought those conversations to the board for us all in a meeting, which I believe is what's happening today in the legislative update. So that's just, I'm a little confused. I do think that we definitely need to sit down and get on the same page about how committees work so that we can move forward cohesively, because right now there just seems to be a lot of not on the same page of what committees and how committees actually work.
Thank you, Ms. Nash. If I may say just a couple of things. I did reach out to the School Board Association and ask for some guidance on committees. Email late today. The lady I had contacted had a death in the family, and it took her a week or so to get back. If the board would like, I can forward that email to everybody so you have it. One thing about, I want to point out here that I really am not opposed or in favor of doing anything here. You know, if the board wishes to change the language of our policy, then we should make proposals and work on that. I did look at board policies from other districts around the state, and the language is pretty standard. Most boards have a policy that's almost identical to ours. So if you'd like to change the language and the way we formulate committees and decisions made to do that, then by all means, certainly proposals, and we'll talk about them, and if we wish to change it, we can. Ms. Porter, would you, Dr. Scott, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for that, and I had an opportunity to listen to what everyone's saying, and I basically agree with what everyone said and the additions they would like to add. One thing that I would like to see added to this policy is the number of board members who will be a part of this committee, because it's my understanding that Mrs. McFadden is the only board member who sits on this committee. And I think collectively we need to have at least 2 or 3 board members, because we don't want a committee with just 1 board member and we're outnumbered by community members as well. So I would like to see that we go back and revise that policy to indicate that there will be 2 or 3 sitting board members, and how members are actually appointed, because I did pause and wanted to know how were these members selected. And I think Mrs. McFadden and I actually had a conversation, and unfortunately some of us did not get the email that she sent out asking that we make suggestions. And I think the same way we did with the superintendent search, we just didn't randomly place people on the committee. I think they had to go through Dr. Franklin through, I think, a process. And I think that's what we need to do when we're placing members on. It should be some type of process or interest from community members if they have children in the district, or if they're serving on different committees already, or, you know, what input can they give to the school district that will be valuable, that we said, okay, this is why this person is on the committee, and this is what they have to bring forward. So I'd like to see us establish some guidelines as to how we select the community members to be on the committee, as well as how many board members should be placed on each committee. And then the third thing that I'd like to see, and I think that I shared this with all board members, that when you have a committee, decide what's going to happen, and then come back and tell us what we're going to do. The purpose of any committee is to meet with your committee, come up with ideas and suggestions, and then report that back to the entire board for feedback. And I think that's the way we need to go moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Ms. Porter, do you have additional comment?
Yes, I just have some suggestions to add to the policy and for board members to consider. So one is I would like for us to add that the purpose or scope of all committees be decided upon by the entire board by way of vote. And then also in paragraph 2, where it says the board may also appoint special and/or ad hoc committees whose members are appointed by the chairman, I would like for the members to be appointed, to be recommended by the superintendent and the board, similar to how advisory committees have. That way, everything is, they're looking for parents who are in our district, who reside in our area, and so forth. They will do all of that work and present it to us, just like advisory committees, and then the board would make approval of those decisions by way of vote. So those are my 2 suggested changes as well.
Okay, thank you. And
Mr. Chairman? Oh, sorry. Mr. Chairman?
Okay, Mrs. Nash. Okay, yes.
I was just going to say, I'm totally in agreement with most of what was said, but I do think that the board should have input as far as to saying, like, hey, we would like to suggest and recommend, and then vote. I don't think that that should be all up to the superintendent to decide that.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. It would be my suggestion at this point that we would get the superintendent, maybe Dr. Franklin, to work on, if everyone would send your suggestions to Dr. Moore and let them work on some proposed changes. Like I said, I looked at some other districts' policies, and for example, the suggestion just now about the special committee being approved by the board and everything, no one else does that. I don't care one way or the other. I honestly, as chairman, don't have any preference on any of this. It says up here on the second paragraph that the board chairman will accommodate board members' committee preferences to the best extent possible. Certainly if somebody wants to be on a committee or something, I'm certainly, I think it'd be appropriate for those people to seek out such an appointment. So that would be my suggestion at this point, for us to work on some of these changes and submit them to the administration so they can compile them and be able to check them for legality and so forth. Dr. Moore, what do you think?
Mr. Trapp, we would be happy to do that for the board. I would also ask the board to consider a point that Ms. Agostini raised. When a committee is selected, for the board to also allocate a budget to that committee, so that, like Ms. McFadden's frustration around the work that she was trying to get done, but she did not have a budget in which she could do that work, and so she had to come to the board to bring that item. So when the board does select a committee or put a committee in place, that a budget be assigned to that committee.
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Washington.
And also, as we're considering language, Robert's Rules of Orders does spell out, how you select members to certain committees. I even think that we may want to just think about, it says in here special and/or ad hoc committees. Like, let's be very specific about what that's going to be, because in Robert's Rules of Order, it talks about a special committee, and it does say that non-members of the board have to be appointed by the board. And so if we are going to, look at language, we have some guidelines already to go by that's outlined by even how we are supposed to conduct business as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Washington. And I would like to add, I did look up some of the Roberts Rules stuff in preparation for this, and, you know, our board policy says the board chairman, and this is talking about special committees, may appoint special and/or ad hoc committees whose members are appointed by the chairman. So that's, if we want to change that back to reflect the Roberts Rules, because we all know that Roberts Rules is at the bottom of the list when it comes to authority. But again, I have no preference one way or the other. I believe in everyone here having a voice, and what we do should be collectively decided on. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes, Dr. Moore.
would the board be receptive to having the board secretary, Ms. Washington, work with administration on drafting the language of the policy?
I think that would be an excellent idea. Mrs. Washington, would you be willing to do that? Okay. All right, are there any further questions or comments on this, on policy BDE?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Agostini.
And I go with the will of the board, but again, this is a policy where we've got a lot of different opinions and a lot of different thoughts going on. I would prefer, and this is just my preference, speaking vocally, that we do it at the workshop that we have scheduled on January 16th, so we can have an open discussion. One of the things that we talked about in our self-evaluation was brainstorming. And I think we do really well doing that. So if we could just have an open, casual discussion about what we want to see, and I think that Mrs. Nash had suggested that we get somebody to come and tell us and explain to us about committees. Maybe we have that discussion of the difference of committees and their purpose, and then we work with the policy. That's just my suggestion.
I think that is the best thing I've heard all night, so I think we should do that.
Mr. Chair?
Mrs. McFadden.
I would like to say thank you all to my board members and colleagues, because this is something that I had to put together quickly so that we could accomplish some goals. But you guys are bringing things that we do need to look at, especially when we're thinking about forming other committees in the future. And again, this is an ad hoc committee, so this is very much able to be dissolved and to start a new committee in 2023 with all of those suggestions that we have in place. So thank you guys for bringing that to my attention. And I meant no harm when the selection of the people that I put on the committee, and had I known that I needed to bring them before you all, I would have. But I think the team that we have is a very good and diverse team. But if there's any discrepancies or whatever, I'm open to hear. But I've already had these people and invited them on my letterhead to be in our committee. So I would take suggestions and thoughts. By the way, if anyone wants to participate, we do have an open session starting in January for students, parents, faculty, and staff to come and speak on policies or legislation, and we will be able to rebuttal at that time to gain an understanding. So if there's any other suggestions, everyone is welcome to come starting January 9th to speak.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden. If there's no further questions, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the next meeting's agenda. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting is December 12th, 2023. We will begin our meeting at 5:30 p.m. With a call to order. Next, we'll move into the approval of the agenda. Once the agenda has been approved, we will then move to executive session. So we'll have a motion to recess to executive session. In that executive session, we'll look at student appeals, student admission requests into the district's adult education program, employment recommendations, and certified releases. We will also then conclude at 6:30 p.m., pending no additional items being added to executive session. Once we return, we will move into our inspirational moments and our Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the consent agenda, which will be an approval of the consent agenda, approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, classified employment releases and in-district transfers, and continuous improvement plans, followed by public participation, and then voting on executive session items, which would include our student appeals, student admission request into district's adult education program, employment recommendations, and certified releases, as well as any needed items that were discussed during executive session. We'll move then into Section 8, which is our unfinished business, action requested. Policy revision, Policy BJ, which was discussed tonight for the first reading on board legislative program, would require a board vote to make the changes. Next, we'll have new business, no action requested. We'll have an audit update from our senior chief financial officer, Mrs. Williams. We'll then move to review the agenda items for the next meeting. If necessary, we'll have a second public participation, a second executive session if needed, and a voting on executive session items if needed, followed by board and superintendent comments and adjournment.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Board members, are there any revisions or additions you would like to see made to the December 12th, 2023 agenda or to a future agenda?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Washington.
Yes, so we have 3 schools that have been designated by the State Department. I know that schools have to submit plans or work on plans, so I'd like for the board to receive an update. What is the school and the district's plan to turn around those schools? Have those plans already been submitted to the State Department? And then what does support look like for those schools?
Would you like to make a motion to add that to the agenda?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to add to the agenda for the board to receive an update on the 3 schools that are on watch from the State Department, to receive an academic update, and what is the plan to support those schools.
All right, Mrs. Washington has made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. Washington, seconded by Mrs. Agostini to add to an item to the agenda. Is there any discussion? All right. Yeah. Oh, that's fine. Well, would you state the motion one more time?
I'd like to make a motion for the board to receive an update on the 3 schools that are on watch by the State Department.
All right, board members, all those in favor, raise your right hand.
I'm raising
All right.
my hand.
Mrs. Nash, what is your vote?
Yes, hand raised.
Okay, Dr. Scott, are you in agreement or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's 7 yes and 0 no. The motion carries, and it will be added to the agenda. Is there any other discussion on next meeting's agenda?
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Washington.
I would like, this is not for the next meeting agenda, but maybe for an upcoming meeting. I know that some schools have begun to put policies in place regarding cell phones and cell phone usage in schools. So I would like for us as a board to look at our cell phone policy, because we know that cell phones tend to be a part of what we see when we get some of those appeals as well. So that is something that I would like for us to address in one of our future board meetings.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Porter.
I'd like to just know if we have made any progress in getting that feedback from our leaders about dress code. And along with that, I would think that cell phones could go in there too, you know, with learning, getting feedback from them before we dive deep into any of those policy changes, especially from our high school principals.
Dr. Moore, will you?
Dr. Franklin.
Yes, ma'am. It was the board's request to get feedback from principals. Our team decided to do feedback from principals as well as our advisory groups to include the student leaders that Dr. Moore meets with monthly, the teacher forum. So we've already gotten feedback from those groups. The remaining group that we need to receive feedback from is the Parent Advisory Council, and that's scheduled for the 26th. It's the Monday after Thanksgiving. So once we have the feedback from that last group, we'll compile that information and then go from there.
Okay, Mrs. Porter would like to make a motion to add that to the next agenda?
With cell phones.
No, it'll be ready in December. I think she,
December, it will be ready for December.
Or, well, I think our thought was for the January
Okay.
policy workshop.
okay. Any other discussion on next meeting's agenda?
Because I know a lot of the teachers are waiting to hear about the bonus. Will that include an update about whether or not we have the funds for that?
I'm looking at Ms. Nash. The answer to that is no, because the update will include the fact that we've submitted on time. Once we submit, we are on fiscal watch, and we still need the state to give us their assessment of our audit. So we will not be able to give an accurate assessment or data to the board at that particular time. We will not probably have that information until January, correct, Ms. Williams?
All right, any other additions or conversation about the agenda?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we had a great and productive meeting tonight, and I love the way that we agreed to disagree, but we did it in a respectful, kind, and loving, considerate manner. So I do appreciate my colleagues for that. With that said, just want to say happy belated Veterans Day to Dr. Moore and all of the military personnel out there. We do say thank you for your service. Also, want to say Happy American Education Week. And it's so fitting that it always falls right before Thanksgiving, because we have to say thank you, and not only during the week of Happy American Education Week, but we should take time to do this monthly, weekly, and even daily, because I think that's what keeps many of our educators going. So, parents, students, please thank one of your colleagues. Send them a letter, a note, give them a Facebook shout out, a positive one. Give them some donuts, flowers, whatever you feel the need to do. But thank an educator. And we're celebrating everyone. So that's from bus drivers to our teachers, cafeteria workers, custodian staff, our principal, assistant principal, TAs, and guest teachers, and so forth. So let's always celebrate them. Let's not wait until the week before Thanksgiving. Let's give thanks to them every month, every week, and every day. And then, on a more sad note, want to send my prayers and my condolences to Dr. Whitney Powell, the principal of Sandlapper, who lost her mom. So want to send the prayers and condolences to their family and to the Sandlapper family. Thank you all, and have a wonderful night. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Mrs. Agostini.
I too want to wish everyone a happy American Education Week, and thank you to all of the R2 staff who make it possible. And as we are closing out Veterans Day, thank you to all those that have served. On Sunday night, my husband and I had the opportunity to host the Virginia Military Institute basketball team at our house for dinner prior to the game on Monday night. And what a remarkable group of young men and what the military does. So I wanted just to take this opportunity to recognize all of our leaders at our JROTC programs for inspiring our students to be responsible, committed, and patriotic. And I just want to say thank you to Major Perry at Spring Valley High School, at Richland Northeast, Master Gunner Westwood High School, Lieutenant Colonel retired Gregory Joe Johnson, who's also retired, at Blythewood High School, Major Eric Brown. Oh, and finally, not to be forgot, there's another one at Blythewood, First Sergeant Frank Bell, and at Ridgeview High School, Captain Christopher Robinson. Thank you so much for all that you do for our students. Have a great night and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini. Mrs. McFadden.
The
Just want to say thank you to my colleagues because we did have a very productive meeting tonight, and I appreciate it. On November the 7th was election night, and so I want to say a special congratulations to the new mayor of Blythewood, Mr. Sloan Griffin, and a special congratulations to our at-large city council member, Mr. Tyler Bailey. I had the opportunity to serve with him on the CRC, and a special congratulations to all we look forward to working with you. The work is with you. The other one is I would like to say a special happy belated birthday to our executive assistant to the board, Miss Tanedra Washington. She celebrated a birthday yesterday, so we want to say happy birthday to her. And I would just like to say, and following Ms. Agostini, all three of my kids right now have been through ROTC. I've got one more left, and so we do appreciate ROTC. Even though students may or may not go to the armed forces, we do respect and appreciate our veterans all across the world, and special thanks to Dr. Moore as well. So I don't know all the names, but Ms. Agostini did a good job starting it off. But if you're a veteran, we say thank you. We appreciate your service to our nation. With that, have a good evening, and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden.
So I just want to say congratulations to my alma mater. And it's basketball season. I cannot wait to visit some middle and high school games. And also, again, Richland Northeast, job well done to the entire teacher, faculty, the staff members, and the administration for the R&E data that was shared tonight during the presentation. Tomorrow is Educational Support Professionals Day for American Education Week. I will always advocate for our educational support professionals, and just wanting you to know that yes, you deserve better pay and thriving working conditions across our district, but thank you all so much for what you do, because without you, our schools would not be able to function. And in our conversation tonight, if we think about our norms that we set, I felt like we built on ideas for one another, that we were working and supporting, consensus-based solutions, and that we honored our colleagues' requests, minded to listening to various ideas and perspectives. And that while I do agree that our district is growing and our school community is growing, I believe it's in our best interest to meet our student needs when we put our students first financially. We have to demonstrate to our community, and we have to continue to build their trust when we're talking about increasing millage rates and bond referendums and so many different things where we're going to be requesting their support. I do look forward to the work that our superintendent and our CFO will continue to do to make sure that we are managing our finances in a manner that will put our employees and our students first. And I want to say this, a new board came on board November the 7th of last year. And this year, we have done some tremendous work as a board. And it may have been very tough conversations, tough closed doors, but I want to say that my first year of serving with each and every, we did not run against Richland 2. We ran for Richland 2. We ran for this district collectively. We ran for these parents, for these students, for the employees, and even for the businesses in the district. And tonight we shared many viewpoints on certain things related to those SBA delegations, and I have to echo what Ms. Agostini said. Those are just things that are presented, but it doesn't change how we view Richland 2. And so while we may have spoke for or against resolutions, please trust and believe me when I say this. This board, we will always advocate with legislation and with county council for what's in the best interest of Richland 2. Thank you all so much, board, and you all have a blessed evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Washington.
Okay, I have a little bit of voice, so I'm going to kind of speed through this. But one, I want to say happy 1 year to everybody, collectively. And also, just kind of echo the sentiments about JROTC. I've gotten a chance over the past, probably month or so to meet a lot of the JROTC students from different Raider teams, and they're just phenomenal and award-winning. And so kudos to them on, I think Ridgeview did the Veterans Memorial, or the Veterans presentation, which was really great, in the color guard. And so shout out to them. It was done really, really well. And just to all the JROTC teams. Also, to Irv Mack for coming out tonight. Thank you so much, Irv, and for FCA and all the great things that they do in the Midlands and how they impact our students. thank you to them. And I hope that, you know, if you don't know a lot about them, anybody in the community, that you get to know them, because they really do try to help parents a big positive light in our community and of Richland too, and just what they do for our teachers. They bring them donuts. They do that for coaches. I mean, they're just really, really giving. And so I just want to say thank you to FCA as a whole, but for Herb tonight for giving us a message about gratitude. And so with that, I've actually been going down the, I think it was like a little things to do in this month for the district. And one of the things was talking about American Education Week and just what to be grateful for and how can we show our support and love. And so I've been reading this book, Marva Collins' Way, A Great Educator. And one of the things she says, this is her quote, "When someone is taught the joy of learning, it becomes a lifelong process that never stops, a process that creates a logical individual. That is the challenge and joy of teaching." So I want to say to all of our educators, thank you for what you do and inspiring and children to learn, but also to all of our educators and our support staff during American Education Week, Thanksgiving, and don't eat too much turkey, but eat enough.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. Mrs. Porter.
A great productive meeting. I had the pleasure to visit Dent Middle School today, and I just wanted to say that thank you to the Dent Scholars Academy. Ms. Ashford said to refer to them as the Dent Scholars, and also I visited with some TLC classrooms with all of our sixth graders. I ran into some of their Diamond Leader mentors while there, and these are community members that visit that school regularly, and they have a group of Diamond Leaders that they mentor, and I was able to see that in action. I also ran into the outreach pastor, Pastor Anthony Harrison from Forward City at Dent Middle School, their social worker, and discussing how they would bless 5 families at Dent. They regularly feed their teachers and mentor students within the school, so I thought that was a phenomenal partnership that I learned about amongst my walk with Ms. Ashford. The environment there is so beautiful. I mentioned to her that, you know, sometimes some of our not so new buildings can look like just brick, right? And then when you walk in, if our leaders in our cabinet and different leaders within the district staff, if you haven't been into Dent Middle School in a while, it's bright when you walk through. And what Ms. Ashford has done with the atmosphere there, I saw the difference, and I just wanted you to know that she misses visitors. So she made sure to tell me that, and that she welcomes them all the time. So I had a great experience there. Thank you, Dent Scholars Academy. Also, for American Education Week, kudos to all of those that devote your heart and time to this beautiful profession. Reflect this week on your why, and humor yourself with memories from your first year in education. I know everyone has a funny story. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Arthur Newton and seeing the hope in me when I wanted to start working in Richland too. So thank you so much. And also, most adults can reminisce on a special teacher in their life, and I have no doubt that many students will share their great memories that they have for our Richland 2 teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Porter. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we learned during our special call board meeting around our norms, as a way to enforce them, Ms. Washington already did that, but to highlight ones that we saw our activities. So she took 2 of the ones I was going to bring forward, but communicators internally and externally. And also, well, I actually have 3. We listened with our hearts, and we're willing to take risk for all children. And I think that's so important for everyone to understand, that we may not all agree and have different perspectives, but we start from a position of we're all here for each child that we have the privilege to educate. And when we start from that position, we see the work that was done tonight, which is the will of the board. So, you know, that's in our norms, and I commend the board for that tonight. I would also like to start with McFadden and the board for approving the resolution. Comply with the law, whether we like it or not. We comply with the law, and this is a solution that allows us to meet the needs of our community. So thank you, Ms. McFadden, for your work on doing that, and the board approving that resolution to be recommended to the School Board Association. Now I get to celebrate our students, which is what brings me joy. So Journalism Awards, and I'm sorry the Richland Northeast leadership has left, but they already know this. So the Richland Northeast High School Cavplex Journalism Program is again winning national awards. Only 9 high school broadcast journalism programs received National Pacemaker Awards. R&E's Morning News was once again named a Broadcast Pacemaker Award winner. So here you see a picture of Mrs., and I've been practicing her name, Mirkovich, celebrating their return from their conference in Boston. So the R&E student journalists won individual awards as well as Best in Show award. So congratulations to all of our Cavplex journalism students. Next, I have the privilege of introducing to the board our new Executive Director of Internal Audits. Yes, I'm excited to share with the board and our community that Richland 2 now has an Executive Director of Internal Auditing. Miss Melissa Myers, please stand up. Melissa is joining us from the State Department of Education, where for the past 19 years she has conducted, managed, and directed the auditing function for the department. Prior to the Department of Education, Ms. Myers was an auditor for the South Carolina Office of the State Auditor. So she knows education and she knows audits, and we are thrilled to have her join the Richland 2 family. She's also the very proud parent of a student at Lonnie B. Nelson. So we are excited to have Miss Melissa Myers join us and join our Richland 2 family. She's already been sending me emails telling me stuff that we need to do that we haven't done. So we're excited to have her. Speaking of audits, we've had federal and state review results come in. So last week, a team from the State Department of Education conducted the district state and federal monitoring reviews for the 2022-2023 school year. The state monitoring review consisted of a desk audit and an on-site verification visit to assess the district's compliance with state regulations and state statutes. I'm very proud to say the district demonstrated compliance with all 47 requirements and received an all clear, no findings rating. Oh, but wait, there's more. The federal monitoring review assessed the district's compliance with all laws, rules, regulations, and policies for several of our federal programs, which includes Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, and Title IX-A. The review included a desk audit and an on-site visit of 6 of our 16 Title I schools. The district demonstrated compliance with all requirements and received, once again, a no findings rating, and no areas of non-compliance were identified. Notably, Richland 2 can now proudly say that this is our 3rd consecutive visit with no findings and no areas of non-compliance identified in federal monitoring review, which is critical to us receiving the money that we are entitled to for our students, because we had no findings and no non-compliance. Additionally, our Office of Federal and State Programs has been invited to present alongside the South Carolina SCDE and Greenville County Schools on our Title I schools comprehensive needs assessment at the South Carolina Association of Title I Administrators annual conference. Our needs assessments are considered some of the best in the state and lay the foundation for all of our Title I programs in our schools. And so we're right up there with Greenville. Yes, we are representing. Yes. Gathering documentation and executing a successful visit was truly a collaborative process among many of the departments and the schools across the district, and we just want to say thank you to everyone. As you can see, we've been very busy with all of these audits and monitoring activities, which take people away or is an additional requirement on top of their normal day-to-day, but our team has risen to the occasion and has performed exceptional. Now, parents, listen up. We are in the window for school choice. It is now open. So please go to the district website and click on the calendar at the bottom to see all the choice events that we are hosting at our schools over the next few weeks. Choice application deadline is Friday, December 15th at 5 p.m. As every board member has already mentioned, we are in American Education Week. This is the week that American education is celebrated. So each day we are celebrating the contributions of our Richland 2 staff. Today was Family Day, and we spotlighted 3 sisters from St. Croix who were dead set against going into education, yet all found their way to Richland 2 school. So here's the video.
Hello, my name is Tabitha Cuffey.
My name is Grace Cuffey.
My name is Trifina Cuffey. I am the City Magnet Lead Teacher at Summit Parkway.
I am the Admin Assistant Bookkeeper here at Center for Inquiry.
I'm the Magnet Lead at Longleaf Middle School for the Zubat Magnet Program and the LEAP Magnet Program. I was not expected to be in teaching at all. That was the last thing on my mind. My parents were teachers. They didn't want us to be teachers. I didn't want to be a teacher. I would see them leave home great and come back a lot different, disheveled actually, and I knew they loved their job because they would still go every day. However, I made up my mind that I would not do it. It would be the last thing that I would ever do. I declared it multiple times to my family, and it didn't turn out that way.
Education is the family business. That's how I describe it.
When I was getting my doctorate, or I was working towards the doctorate in genetics at University of Iowa, I realized that I enjoyed the teaching portion more than anything else. It started off with tutoring, then I became an avid tutor, a long-term substitute, and then now I'm teaching.
We grew up with charts of all sorts of things in our house. We had maps and encyclopedias and number charts and letter charts and all of that stuff, and our walls were painted with it. That's what we grew up on. And then turns out my son grew up the same way, and you don't realize until afterwards that we were just all doing the same thing. So it's always been an education thing for us.
Every school that I've gone to, every principal I've had, every sort of family I've been around and coworkers, they've really helped me find my success, find myself, and I've never been wanting of anything because there's always support everywhere that I go.
Richland 2, at its core, does kind of take the family thing seriously. It tries to make everything as cohesive as possible. It feels, as a parent too in the district, it feels like the people who are in the middle of it really try to make sure that you feel the same thing no matter what school you go to.
The people I have met at Richland 2, every employee at Richland 2, the connections I have made, people I've met, even as a district teacher of the year, those individuals I've met, even in the district office, they are all fired up and passionate about ensuring that student success happens. What I love most about my job right now, because I get to offer as much opportunity as I can. Sometimes there's so many things that I want to do in a time span. I don't have enough time for it, but those moments help me to realize the reason why I have this job and why I love this job. The controlled chaos of sorts, the idea that you can look around the room and see everybody is learning something. And it is the engagement of the fact that you don't know what the possibilities are, but somebody might have come up with, like even when they play with the Legos and they realize, oh my gosh, I can make a hinge out of this. It's I made a door. That is that kind of excitement because they did it.
This is one of the only places that I've been at just as a member, but also as an employee, where Not to say that other schools don't do what they say, but the feeling of community is real here. We take it very seriously. And it's not to the point where, like, we make it a point to make it important to other people. It's just a thing. It's just what we do. Everything we do is around community and bringing people in, making people feel involved and centered into us. So it just made sense when I finally got here that I should just be here.
And I love that statement. It's just what we do. That's what we do in Richland too. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize our veterans. So thank you for everybody for your recognition of me as a veteran, but I also want to recognize our veterans. Last week, I had the pleasure of being the speaker at 2 of our high schools' Veterans Day events, and they were just fantastic programs because each of the programs is run by students, not the adults. The students plan the activities, they practice, they organize it. Ms. McFadden is shaking her head because her kids have done that. This is a student-led program to honor and celebrate our veterans who stand in the gap for the freedoms that we enjoy, because freedom is not free. And so I want to thank Westwood High School as well as Blythewood High School for the invitation. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it to every Veterans Day program because they were at the same time, but I did get to those 2 schools who got on my calendar first, and I would like to just show a short video from the Westwood High School to see their moving patriotic tribute to all veterans.
Throughout this nation's history, America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen have bravely answered the call to defend our freedom. Today, it is our privilege to say thank you to all of America's veterans, to let them know that we appreciate them for their service and honor them for their sacrifices.
I want you to understand why service is so important. Notice over here you see a chair that has a pair of boots and a beret. That chair is to honor our fallen comrades. Our comrades that have made the ultimate sacrifice. The ultimate sacrifice is when we are willing to lay our life down for our brothers and our sisters, and for you.
The United States became involved in this war to prevent the spread of communism throughout Southeast Asia. From 1964 to 1975, 9.2 million Americans served, and over 58,000 lost their lives. Over 8 million Vietnam veterans are still living today.
And one of the most impressive things about each of the events at the schools was what you saw the student body do. They stood, they were quiet, they were respectful. And sometimes I know kids get a bad rap for things that they do, but what those students demonstrated to me was a pride in the work of their colleagues, because this was a student-led organization. And last but not least, for the veterans, November 10th was the Marine Corps birthday. And I'm a Marine Corps spouse because my husband is a Marine. While I'm a retired Army, I am a Marine Corps wife. I want to say happy belated birthday to the Marine Corps and to my Marine. Last but not least, we are in a season of gratitude. And so I would just encourage everyone as we are moving through this season, starting with Happy Thanksgiving and moving into our holiday celebrations, that we do take time to thank people and recognize gratitude of service that each of us has the privilege to do as we are in this particular season. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I do have a question for you, Dr. Moore, though. Are our school buses air conditioned?
Yes.
They are? Oh, wow, okay. I have a school
And
bus story.
hopefully the heater works too.
No, I do want to speak just a second about gratitude and about the people we sometimes overlook. My sister is a teacher at BHE, and she watches a lot of the board meetings. I encourage her not to, but she does anyway. But she told me that when she heard me mention I was going to tell a school bus story, she said, "Oh, I thought you were going to tell the story about how, when I was second grade and I rode the bus with you, how each day before we got home I'd go and put all the windows up." Because the buses back then were these little yellow ovens half of the year that delivered baked goods to homes throughout the community. But anyway, and I don't know if she was serious or not, but she did put the windows up, but I had no recollection of that, absolutely none. And I thought it was funny that for this second grader, memory of being on the school bus with her older brother, her going around and being helped. And it made me realize that so many of the things that happen to us in our lives, we don't even realize that people have done something for us. And that gratitude to me is a lifestyle. I mean, this time of the year, we're all thinking about gratitude, and that's great. But really, we're truly grateful people are grateful all the time for everything. And I just want to say that, I want to express my gratitude, especially to our school community, to our teachers, our janitors, the guys that I've laid on the floor in the schools and fixed and repaired things. So I certainly know that there are people that have to do those things. I've stood in mud in one of the schoolyards and welded things. So I know that we do think that we have people behind the scenes that do things that make our lives comfortable, that make things move forward. And I just want to say thank you to all of those people, as well as our teachers. It's no surprise to me that my sister is a teacher because, even as a second grader, she wanted to could get off the bus instead of have to put all the windows up. And that's my message, I guess, I would like to share with everyone tonight, that I speak only for myself here. I feel confident everyone in this room agrees with me, but I am truly grateful for everything that our staff, our teachers, all our volunteers, everybody does to make our lives comfortable and make things move forward. At my home, I have what I like to refer to as a toothpaste fairy. Every time I use up a tube of toothpaste, when I open the drawer up, there's a new one there. And I told my wife that we have a toothpaste fairy, dear. But I actually think it's her. But still, it's all those little things, and truly grateful people recognize, and we don't always express gratitude, but I'd like to take this opportunity in this setting and express my gratitude for everything everybody does. The older you get, the more you realize you can't do everything by yourself, and it's all the people around you that make your life move forward. I just want to say thank you to everyone. Everyone in this room, I know y'all all are ready to go like I am. My legs are asleep. I'm not sure I can get up, but still, we appreciate everybody that's here with us tonight. Now, with that, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Mr. Trapp?
Mrs. Porter?
I move that we adjourn the November 14th, 2023 regular board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Mrs. Porter, seconded by many people. And is there any discussion? All right, everyone.
Just for the record, you have to give a name. You have to give a name for a second.
It was Dr. Scott. Thank you, Dr. Scott. Everyone that's ready to go, please raise your right hand. Dr. Scott and Mrs. Nash, are y'all ready? All right, it's unanimous. We're adjourned.